A blue-haired girl wakes in strange lands. She questions her location and current situation. A judge bangs his gavel, demanding silence. The judge prepares the verdict as the girl feels a sudden sounding. She struggles with a headache as the judge mentions her victims. The judge sentences the bound child to life imprisonment. She is stunned by the harsh sentence. She wakes to find herself a prisoner. A carriage rattles as a guard questions her sanity. The guard wonders how a child could be a mass murderer. He warns that this prison is for the insane. She realizes she has possessed a child serial killer. She laments her new life as a murderer. This setting is from her favorite dark novel. She is a side character facing hellish accusations. A sudden creak sounds as they reach the destination. The guard identifies the location as Niflheim prison. He declares she will rot there for her life. Niflheim is an isolated land called Frozen Hell. A heavy thud sounds as she is thrown into confinement. She rejects the guard's order to repent for crimes. A weary sigh sounds as she contemplates her fate. She recalls the sentence and the prison's brutal reputation. She resolves to find a way out. She remembers the novel's plot involving the male lead. His arrival marks the start of the original story. She feels confident because she knows the plot. A new problem suddenly occurs to her. She realizes her current body is far too young. She has arrived 10 years before the story begins. Escape is impossible without the male lead's future arrival. She screams in frustration, alarming the nearby prison guards. Intense determination burns in her red eyes. She vows to survive this ordeal. Years pass as she grows into a woman. Her goal is to meet him. A red-haired woman named Hyla Kaman arrives her bride. A guard orders the new prisoners to listen. He explains the prison's layout and prisoner gathering areas. Hyla examines the tower and questions its purpose. A sudden swish sounds as she spots someone sleeping. Hyla is mesmerized by the blue-haired woman's beauty. The blue-haired woman holds her poem. Violence erupts nearby as a prisoner begs for help. The guard explains the ranking system to terrify Hyla. Fights in the tower allow prisoners to raise ranks. Hyla realizes how terrifying the prison environment is. The blue-haired woman approaches the new prisoner. Hyla nervously confirms her identity to the woman. The blue-haired woman notes that Hyla dirtied her floor. Mintha apologizes while continuing her sweeping days.
Mintha suggests that the guard should be the one punished.
A sudden wet hawk sounds as a thug spits. The inmates mock Mintha's pretty abeyance. They taunt her for looking soft and sweet. The guard sighs while Hyla wonders if anyone will intervene. A thug aggressively grabs Mintha's blue hair. He crudely invites her to have a good time. Mintha's red eyes glow with lethal intent. Nearby prisoners watch the unfolding harassment. Hyla asks to intervene, but the guard remains indifferent. Hyla watches as a surge of energy gathers. An explosion of light blinds Hyla. A shocked gasp sounds as Mintha readies her groom. Mintha smiles as her magical power glows. She stands enveloped in a powerful aura. Hyla marvels at Mintha's immense and powerful Kia. Mintha focuses her divine energy elegantly. A sudden quick swish sounds as she strikes. The thug questions her strange, overwhelming power. A dull thud sounds as Mintha strikes. The thugs scream for help while crying out in pain. They groan as Mintha delivers a relentless beating. Mintha credits her humble broom for the victory. A thug realizes she is a long-range fighter. He reaches out to grab her. He attempts to bind her in an instinct. Mintha smiles as the thug approaches her. She effortlessly hurls him against the tower. The warden calls Mintha a crazy bitch. Mint stretches casually in the prison word ad. The warden scolds her for fighting during her punishment. Mintha Rimanetas is a prisoner convicted of murder. She is the tower's only top-tier prisoner. Mintha sits atop a mountain of beaten opponents. Kia is a power used by Hafka World. It enhances bodies or controls elements and minds. Every user wields a unique magnitude of power. Mintha reached the pinnacle upon her awakening. The warden demands to know her thoughts. He orders her not to touch new prisoners. Mintha claims self-defense against the warden's accusations. Ralph Gammon is Niflheim's general administrator. Mintha names her hairlocks Amy and Angel. A sudden jolt sounds as the warden scolds her insanity. He questions why she allowed the harassment. Mintha promises to manage the difficult inmates. Survival in prison requires abandoning common sense and decency. Mintha clings to her past life's fading memories. Mintha realizes she has finally reached her limit. Mintha Ramirez questions the administrator's true motives for summoning her. Ralph Gaiman laughs off her suspicion, claiming it's a routine visit. Her attention is caught by a sudden, quick flinch sounding as she remains cautious. She wonders what cruel hope the warden is using as bait. Ralph offers to fake her death in exchange for a critical mission. He shocks her by declaring she is being released from prison immediately. A subtle, knowing smile spreads across Mintha's face. Ralph reveals that a high-profile prisoner will be arriving very soon. Mintha's objective is to ensure the VIP survives the prison's brutality. Ralph presses her for a decision on his strict conditions. Minthe weighs the weight of such a significant and dangerous promise. She agrees to the deal, fully prepared for the task ahead. Minthe extends her hand to finalize the agreement with the woman. They seal the pact as Ralph warns her old life is over. A sudden, sharp snap sounding punctuates their final and binding handshake. She looks forward to her new freedom with cold determination. A sudden, heavy thud sounding echoes as she grabs the door handle. Minthe admires her new reflection as a plain brown-haired man. She fumbles with her belongings while letting out a quiet whooks. Minthe carries her crate through the prison's cold stone corridors. Ramona and Daryl react with pure shock at Minthe's sudden departure. They fear the warden is sending their boss to her execution. Daryl realizes the warden finally reached his limit with Minthe's attitude. Minthe dismisses their worries, leaving them in a state of panic.
She tells Hyla that her timing for arrival was unfortunately bad.
Hyla is stunned, having expected Minthe to be her guide for a leak. Minthe laughs as she hands Hyla's orientation over to Ramona and Daryl. She offers a casual goodbye to her fellow inmates. Ramona screams in frustration, convinced her boss has finally lost her mind. The scene shifts as she prepares to enter the lion's den. Minthe's new identity is a stark contrast to her former beauty. A sudden, high-pitched ping sounding accompanies her surprise at the transformation. She questions if the magical disguise is truly real. Minthe reflects on the unexpected nature of the prisoner she must guard. She feels lost in the confusion of her new appearance. Minthe is horrified to learn she is being sent to a men's prison. Ralph orders her to keep her true biological identity hidden at all costs. She carefully inspects the effectiveness of the magical disguise in the mirror. Minthe makes a crude joke about the physical mechanics of her disguise.
Ralph explodes in anger, calling her an ill-mannered brat for her comment.
The warden laments her total lack of common decency and social standards. Ralph confirms that her cover as a prison guard is fully prepared. Minthe finds seeing a stranger's face in the mirror deeply unsettling. She admits the artifact's ability to alter her appearance is impressive. The magic has completely overwritten her hair and eye colors. Even her frame and bone structure have been convincingly masculinized. She is now the unremarkable opposite of the famous Minthe Rimnades. Her new, forgettable features make her the perfect undercover agent. Minthe dons her new uniform with a sudden tug sounding. She enters the prison not as a convict, but as a guard. The brown-haired man looks chapped. Chibi Garrett clenches his fists while noting he spent 10 days memorizing the thick guard manual since Mint disappeared. A hand turns a door handle. Against a royal pattern, narration explains that in Niflheim, a new boss is chosen if the current one is missing for over 7 days, and 10 days have already passed. Opening the heavy double doors, Garrett wonders if a new boss has already been appointed. The other guard leads the way, addressing the newcomer as Sir Bart. Garrett reflects on how his old name, appearance, and gender are completely gone, but he finds this change acceptable. The guide mentions that Sergeant Stephen was supposed to accompany them but is running late, to which Garrett acknowledges. Garrett looks out at the tall stone towers of Niflheim, noting it has been 10 years since he was first trapped in this place, with today's VIP inmate arriving. Stars fall across the sky. A young white-haired girl sits alone as narration describes the foolishness of hoping to escape when the male lead finally arrived. Looking at the back of a silver-haired boy, the narration notes that the prison is merely a small part of the male lead's backstory. A frayed rope snaps under tension, while narration laments that the timing of his arrival was always an uncertain guess. A large silhouette sits upon a grand throne, while the mission is restated: protect the warden's guest and make him the new boss of Niflheim. Reaching a heavy iron gate, the guide identifies the room holding today's new inmate. Garrett steps forward with determination, eager to finally see the prisoner's face and begin the escape.
He walks down the corridor.
Standing before the bars, the guide introduces the specific prisoner Garrett will be responsible for overseeing. Garrett's green eye widens in shock. Fragmented panels reveal silver hair. A silver-haired man with piercing purple eyes is identified as prisoner Helios. Garrett breaks into a nervous sweat, overwhelmed by confusion and silent questions. Helios stares back with intensity. A sudden, sharp spark sounding punctuates Garrett's internal panic as he wonders why the male lead is already here. Garrett remains stunned, questioning why the male lead is standing directly in front of him. Narration recalls the plot where Helios is imprisoned and eventually manages a legendary escape. Niflheim stands isolated on a rock as text declares he will be the first person in history to break out. Romantic imagery depicts Helios' future, where he meets the female lead and eventually enacts revenge on the imperial family. Garrett notes that while the prisoner's noble status is hidden from others, the warden likely knows his true identity. Garrett weighs his options, wondering if he should follow the warden's original mission or use the male lead's appearance as a new lifeline for escape. He rejects the old plan. Garrett resolves that he will not wait around for an escape plan he doesn't fully understand. A golden crown is best. A sudden, light thud sounding follows Garrett's footsteps as he reaches a final verdict. He decides his first move as a guard will be to get close to the prisoner. Helios glares with deep suspicion. Garrett clears his throat while preparing to start his new approach. Garrett strikes a confident pose as a manual describes how to comfort a trembling, freshly processed prisoner. Garrett tells Helios that his eyes don't lie and predicts he will be very popular around the prison, leaving Helios in a state of shock. A small image of Mint appears while Garrett promises to have the prisoners back. Helios screams in disgust from behind the bars while Garrett finds his intense reaction amusing. Garrett defensively claims he is extremely hygienic, while the other guard nervously tries to get his attention. The fellow guard explains that Garrett's wording is quite misleading, which Garrett questions with a simple,
The guard clarifies that such comments are inappropriate for men to say to one another, referencing Garrett's true hidden identity.
Garrett suddenly remembers she is currently cross-dressing. Sergeant Stephen calls her face courtesan-like.
The exhaustion of workplace social dynamics, Hicks.
Sergeant Stephen introduces himself quite prayerfully. He questions Garrett's sudden mocking attitude. Stephen attributes Garrett's behavior to petty jealousy. Garrett admits to calculated workplace survival tactics. She apologizes for her feigned inferiority complex. Garrett declares Helios is far too good-looking. Their misunderstanding clears up perfectly well. Prisoner profile drilling proves very useful. Stephen asks about Helios's dark crime history. Helios stands accused of horrific mass murder. A shift change begins immediately. Garrett escorts Helios through the cold holes. Helios is assigned to a filthy cell. Tower trials offer much better living conditions. Garrett begins her personal guard assignment. Helios remains skeptical of her protective skills. Garrett vows to prevent any permanent injury. She casually unlocks his heavy iron shackles. Helios studies his peculiar new guard closely. He threatens to snap his protector. Garrett questions his locked internal tower. She delivers a sudden and warning strike. Garrett challenges the prisoner to strike back. She demands he stop wasting valuable time. Helios launches a fast and aggressive punch. Garrett effortlessly counters and haps him. Helios falls to the ground in shock. He gasps at her overwhelming hidden strengths. Garrett explains the absolute importance of Tia. She offers advice on vulnerable eye defense. Garrett calls the dangerous prisoner cute. Helios screams at her obvious mocking tone. She emphasizes the extreme danger of poison. Tower rank trials open tomorrow morning. Helios considers his first trial choice. Helios asks if it is true that climbing higher in the prison brings one closer to the outside world, and Garrett confirms it is. Chibi Garrett thinks about how the hope of escape is often false, then asks the prisoner what his choice will be. Glowing crosses fill the background. Helios looks up at Garrett. A subtle, satisfied smile spreads across Garrett's face as he simply says, "Good." Garrett vows to take excellent care of Helios until the eventual day of his release. A sudden, angry shout echoes loudly. Prisoners gather in the open stone courtyard. Helios reacts with a sudden, violent strike. His temper is far more volatile. Garrett demands to be addressed properly. Helios questions her failed protection promise. Garrett walks away with cold indifference. She asks if he almost died. Weakness is fatal in this brutal environment. A golden magical energy manifests suddenly. Garrett shields Helios from a blast. She identifies the harmful magical attack take. Chibi Mintha notes her weak output while hiding her unique Kia. Courtyard prisoners notice a guard protected a prisoner as Helios notes his generous demonstration. Chibi Helios shouts in protest while Garrett tells him to cry all he wants. Sergeant Stephen advises the rookie to tone down his rank climbing efforts. Stephen smiles while saying he's moving on. A sudden, heavy thud sounding follows the order to enter the tower. Guards lead prisoners through the courtyard. Helios walks beside Garrett while narration explains the confusion of Niflheim newcomers. Text explains the tower's mandatory entry and trial requirements. Mintha reflects on using rank division to manage troublesome criminals easily. Tower trials consist of 100 floors. Trials require surviving extreme situations. Floors 1 to 20 feature an insects and animals theme, while Garrett asks about an earlier event. Helios asks about the shield, while Garrett wonders if he knows about Kita. Helios tells Garrett to prioritize survival over curiosity. A sudden, heavy creak sounding follows the opening of the tower entrance. Guards and prisoners receive orders to move to their respective stations. Garrett considers giving Helios a subtle hint away from watching eyes. Garrett whispers a warning to avoid being eaten alive while grabbing Helios' sleeve. Helios looks back and tells the guard to come back alive. A sudden, quick clock sounding marks a hand being cut. Helios grips Garrett's hand and asks what happens if he survives. Garrett promises to explain the shield's creation only upon the prisoner's survival. A sudden, sharp clock sounding accompanies the order to move on. Tower interior glows with magical energy. Garrett looks down from the observation deck, reflecting on his change in perspective. A voice addresses the rookie assigned under Steven. Sergeant Kane Dunst introduces himself as Garrett offers a formal photo. Kane invites Garrett to call him Big Bro while Chibi Mintha questions his sanity. Steven's oddball description is mentioned as Garrett reluctantly complies with the name. Kane demands he repeat the nickname one more time. The sergeant breaks into loud laughter at the recruit's obedience. Kane cackles while planning to break the Merkian. Kane suddenly throws a powerful kick. A sudden loud crack sounding occurs as the kick strikes a barrier. Kane winces in sudden and severe pain. Garrett realizes he used Kia instinctively, while Kane notes only Imperial Knights use such techniques. Kane dismisses the guard to watch his stray mutt as Chibi Minthe celebrates.
Garrett looks for the male protagonist.
Helios stands exhausted in the arena. Glowing-eyed rats swarm the arena floor. A sudden, high-pitched squeak sounding follows a rat-leaping chord. The official start of the first floor trial is announced. Rules state prisoners can choose up to 3 weapons from the stand. Rats pour from multiple dark openings. Prisoners scream for help as they are overwhelmed by the mass of rodents. Helios swings a halberd to clear the attacking rats. Only 5 arena survivors remain standing. A prisoner notes the 20-minute attack pattern as Helios tracks the remaining rest time. A final thought bubble laments that this cannot go on forever. Helios grips his weapon tightly while glancing back at the observation deck. Garrett leans against the window frame, wondering if the prisoner is still tracking his movements. Garrett's earlier warning about avoiding leg injuries echoes through the dark chamber. Helios realizes the guard gave him a specific hint, leading him to choose the spear. He remains puzzled by the warning regarding his legs. A sudden, sharp glint sounding fills Helios's piercing purple eye as he focuses. Garrett turns his head away from the arena with a silent expression. Helios stands ready for the coming onslaught. The silver-haired prisoner looks on with intense concentration. Garrett smugly insists on being addressed with his proper title of Sir Garrett. Helios mutters to himself, causing the guard to wonder what he is saying. A sudden, quick tap sounding marks Garrett's finger moving as he considers offering more help.
Garrett whispers a cryptic message down to the arena about a circle. He completes his secret tip by mentioning a weapon.
Helios looks up toward the balcony in deep thought. He repeats the guard's words, questioning the meaning of the circle. Chaos erupts as prisoners warn each other that the enemies are gathering again. A sudden, high-pitched scrit sounding follows a massive horde of glowing-eyed rats charging forward. Helios stares at the monsters, asking what kind of creatures they are. Helios experiences a moment of sudden realization. He connects the guard's hint to the circle and his weapon. Helios sprints toward the danger, ignoring a prisoner's confused shout. He determines that he must strike the target's circle. A sudden loud thud sounding accompanies Helios stabbing a rat marked with a glowing red emblem. Brilliant white light erupts from the spear upon contact. A sudden booming crack sounding follows the release of powerful energy as a prisoner questions Helios's power. Helios focuses on the swarm while Garrett celebrates his plan finally coming together. Helios swings his glowing spear, cutting through the rodents with ease. He notes that killing rats won't end the trial and realizes his spear is shrinking. Helios decides to charge toward the entrance where the rats are pouring out. He runs across the arena floor with incredible speed. A sudden, quick squeak sounding marks a target rat screeching in the distance. Helios races down a long, dark stone corridor. A sudden, sharp scrit sounding marks Helios sliding to a halt. He reaches a vast cliff and wonders what lies ahead as rats fall into the abyss. He realizes the bridge is the only way across the hidden gorge. Garrett's warning about the legs finally makes perfect sense. Helios strikes the supports of the bridge with his spear. A sudden, heavy crash sounding follows the bridge collapsing and dropping the swarm. A magical screen declares the trial complete as the spear crumbles to dust. The system offers mocking congratulations to the survivors of the first floor. A notification confirms they are now eligible to challenge the second floor. Helios stands exhausted as the sound of rhythmic clapping begins. Garrett claps with a bright, cheerful smile on his face. He tells the survivors to rejoice while his fellow guards look on in confusion. Narration explains the trial's requirements of using Kia to destroy the bridge. Garrett thinks about the importance of praise while Helios stares at him in disbelief. A nearby guard suggests Garrett can stop clapping, to which he politely agrees. An officer orders Garrett to finish the transfer and report to Sir Steeden. Sergeant Kane Dunst glares from the shadows, vowing revenge for his earlier humiliations. Garrett questions if an arrogant vow was made while the prisoner addresses him casually. Helios focuses intensely on his surroundings. Garrett demands the prisoner address him by his proper title. Garrett notes it is time for the student to remember his name while the prisoner considers his height. A sudden, sharp crack sounding follows a quick leg sweep. Helios screams as he is knocked down. Garrett claims the new height is perfect as Helios calls him a lunatic while clutching his leg.
Garrett roughly grabs the silver-haired prisoner's head.
Chibi Helios questions the guard's actions, while Garrett plans to finish with a compliment.
Garrett notes how soft the prisoner's hair is as Helios protests being treated like an animal. Helios bats the guard's hand away and demands he stop his behavior. Minth observes the prisoner's weak Kia and confirms his status as the male league. Helios reminds his instructor of the promise to explain everything if he survived.
Garrett acknowledges that he will keep his promise while walking away.
Helios flinches as he watches the guard. Garrett warns that he will not tolerate any insubordination. He tells the prisoner to keep that warning in mind.
Garrett firmly holds the prisoner's chin while leaning down.
Garrett instructs the prisoner to call him master during their training sessions.
Helios remains silent in response to the order. Helios mentions his desire for a shield, but Garrett mocks his ambitious goals given his weak energy perception.
Helios complains about the month of theory study while Garrett dismisses his frustration. Garrett calls the student by his title while Helios asks him to stop using the term prisoner.
Garrett ignores the request and insists on the prisoner label.
Narrative text defines Chia as a universal energy source. Text explains that Chia takes different forms depending on its application. Helios notes that the guard has repeated this information many times. A graphic illustrates the 5 distinct types of Chia handling.
Garrett explains that talent or effort can allow the use of 2 traits.
Helios questions the guard's sudden intentions while crouching on the floor.
Garrett claims he has previous teaching experience, while Helios realizes he is not the first student.
Garrett asks if his history matters, and Helios tells him to continue the lesson. A sudden, quick clock sounding follows Garrett walking away. Garrett declares that brutal training is the most effective way to learn.
Helios reacts with confusion to the statement.
Garrett gives a tip about gathering energy in the stomach, while Helios remains puzzled.
Garrett announces he will demonstrate the 5 types directly as Helios reacts with shock. Helios asks for a proper explanation first, while Garrett promises to use only one hand. A sudden, quick swish sounding follows the start of a scream.
A sudden, loud thud sounding accompanies Garrett delivering a powerful, energy-enhanced punch.
Text identifies the current demonstration as the musculoskeletal type. A graphic explains that this type increases attack and defense through localized energy gathering.
A sudden, raspy cough sounding follows Helios being sent flying backward.
Mintha notes the prisoner is holding on with his knees and confirms his role as the male lead. Helios gasps while reflecting on the force of the previous strike. He concludes his instructor is insane after realizing the attack could have been fatal. Garrett orders him to get up for the elemental type demonstration while Helios protests the training style. Garrett conjures fire in his hand and tells the prisoner to endure it. Text explains that elemental types apply properties like water or fire to their energy. A sudden, sharp scrit sounding occurs as Garrett strikes with fire and explains that these are long-range attackers. Helios screams in pain. Text describes the material type as an ability to coat or create objects. A sudden, quick swish sounding follows Garrett swinging a blade of energy.
Helios lies completely exhausted on the stone arena floor.
Garrett decides to end the training session for the day.
Helios, looking drained, notes that there are still 2 types of handling left to cover.
An illustration of the mental type appears as Garrett explains its use for brainwashing or reading minds, admitting his personal dislike for it.
Garrett details the other category, which encompasses unique abilities that don't fit into the previous 4 types. He claims to have a basic grasp of every power, though the silver-haired prisoner finds the assertion doubtful.
Helios reflects on how his journey led him to the summit of the oppressive prison.
He expresses annoyance at being constantly labeled as a mere beginner. A sudden, sharp sounding occurs as Helios's purple eyes narrow in reaction to the guard's proximity. Garrett crouches over the exhausted prisoner, who remains lying on the floor. Helios asks what is happening as Garrett begins to pat his head. Garrett corrects him by demanding the use of his proper title, noting the prisoner's lack of effort in remembering it.
Helios thinks back to a tip regarding the proper way to handle someone's hair.
A mental image shows Garrett previously grabbing and pulling the silver-haired man's hair. Garrett looks down with a calm, subtle smile. The instructor firmly tilts the prisoner's chin upward to meet his gaze. Garrett asks which of the 3 attacks from the day's training was the simplest to defend against. Helios enters a state of deep thought while considering his response. He recalls being hit by the energy spear and concludes that the material type was the most manageable. Helios remains silent while reflecting on the sensation of the strike. Garrett tells the prisoner to observe closely as the scene shifts back to their training environment.
Helios shouts in protest against the brutal training, but Garrett insists that physical experience is the most efficient teacher.
Helios stretches and admits to himself that the logic behind the harsh lessons is frustratingly sound. A long-haired woman with striking pink eyes watches the pair while laughing softly to herself. Helios covers his eyes, questioning the mental state of his instructor. He identifies Garrett as the most eccentric person he has ever encountered. The mysterious woman continues to observe the training with an unreadable expression.
Garrett pinches Helios's cheek while remarking on how much more training he requires, drawing a frustrated cry from the prisoner. Helios remains puzzled by the guard's true nature and his reasons for providing assistance.
He reflects on the unexpected comfort found in the guard's touch.
Helios rests his face against Garrett's hand, deciding to accept the gesture of goodwill. He tells the guard to do as he pleases while offering a rare, faint smile. The narrative shifts to the 96th floor of the tower, where a tired voice echoes through the grand hall. A pink-haired woman wearing a blue prisoner's uniform yawns broadly. Identified as Ramona, a poison specialist, she wonders aloud about the captain's tardiness. A man peeks from behind a column, baffled by how a woman known only for lower floors reached such heights. Ramona sits atop a defeated man, noting it has been 2 months since their leader appeared. She ponders if the captain is prone to causing trouble every 2 months. Back at the training grounds, Garrett commands Helios to take the leap. The silver-haired prisoner reacts with a look of pure shock and confusion. Garrett maintains a pleasant expression while insisting his student trust his instructions. Helios points toward a bed of lethal spikes below, demanding they be cleared first. He accuses his instructor of trying to kill him, while Garrett cheerfully guarantees his safety. Narrative text reveals 2 months have passed as Helios reaches the 7th floor. A freckled guard informs the rookie that he has been assigned even more prisoner duty. The guard wonders aloud if Garrett managed to offend someone in the higher ranks. Garrett reflects on his supposedly normal work life despite the unusual circumstances.
Flashbacks show Garrett taking orders literally, leading to scalding tea, burned documents, and a blocked sergeant.
Mintha observes the situation with satisfaction, glad to keep an eye on the male lead. Helios questions the logic of jumping onto a floor covered in sharp obstacles.
Garrett notes his student's lack of faith while Helios recalls a previous near-fatal training strike.
Garrett explains that material types thrive in extreme peril, dismissing Helios's protests about the danger.
The instructor suggests that this harsh training is better than actually dying within the tower. Garrett instructs the prisoner to find a way to save his own life while falling.
A sudden, quick swishing sound follows Garrett shoving Helios over the ledge. Helios falls into the abyss, screaming at his instructor's perceived insanity. Garrett offers a cheerful wave as the prisoner continues his panic descent.
The guard laughs heartily at the successful start of the exercise. A long, desperate scream echoes through the training chamber.
Helios finds himself safely suspended in a glowing energy web, much to his master's delight.
The prisoner lies in the web with his eyes covered, overwhelmed by the experience. Garrett checks if his student is injured while Helios reflects on the nonsensical nature of his success.
Helios wonders how his power functioned as Garrett's laughter continues from the ledge above.
Garrett looks down, explaining that common sense is irrelevant within the tower's walls. He promises that Helios will eventually understand as they continue their progress. The guard turns and walks away through the stone corridor.
Minthe senses a watcher nearby, dismissing the warden as too sloppy to be the culprit. A large bald man in prisoner clothes approaches Helios with a menacing, predatory grin. Both Garrett and Helios turn to face the unwelcome interruption. Garrett identifies the intruder as a senior warden who has wandered far from his assigned sector.
He spots Sergeant Kane Dunst hiding behind a pillar and realizes he is the source of the trouble. Dunst watches from the shadows, eager to see the rookie guard and his charge humiliated. The bald man mocks Helios for being protected by a guard. Helios feels a sudden, crushing weight of energy pressing down on him. He realizes the attacker is pinning him down with sheer physical force. The silver-haired prisoner narrows his eyes, focusing his resolve against the pressure. Garrett intercedes by grabbing the warden's arm while casually mentioning the day's meal. Helios notices his physical power returning once the oppressive aura from earlier was lifted. A bald man expresses shock that his telekinetic hold was broken so easily.
Garrett turns his head with a cold, focused look in his eyes.
A sudden sharp sounding follows Garrett placing a hand on Helios's back and commanding everyone to halt.
Helios identifies the bald man as Senior Warden Grogi, who is enraged by the interference of a low-ranking guard.
Garrett warns the warden that attacking another guard constitutes a grave violation of the rules.
A sudden, quick sounding occurs as Grogi charges a sphere of purple energy in his hand, intending to kill.
The long-haired woman watches the escalating conflict with intense interest.
A sudden, sharp sounding marks Grogi's panic as he discovers he is completely paralyzed.
He realizes Garrett's telekinetic strength vastly outclasses his own.
Garrett tells Helios to pay attention, explaining that standard logic does not apply within the tower's walls.
Helios looks on in shock as the guard prepares to deal with the threat.
Grogi screams for the guard to stay away, but Garrett calmly notes that the fix for the situation is easy.
A sudden, booming sounding follows Garrett flicking his fingers and sending the senior warden flying backward.
Garrett gestures toward the defeated man, demonstrating the simplicity of his power. Narrative instructions suggest delivering a sharp flick to the forehead.
Garrett and Mintha stand together with confident smiles.
A sudden, sharp sounding follows the bald man being abruptly overwhelmed. Garrett stands victoriously over his fallen opponent as Helios looks on in silence. A sudden, loud crunch sounding follows Garrett stepping firmly onto the man's hat. He explains that elemental types must be disabled completely, claiming he is stomping lightly as a warning. Helios reacts with a look of pure shock at the guard's cold efficiency. 2 daggers lie on the stone floor as Helios wonders where they came from. The surrounding prisoners panic, questioning why someone would throw a weapon after their leader collapsed. Helios puts a hand to his head, regretting his sudden lapse in focus. Garrett stands behind his student as a sudden, bright flare of golden energy manifests between them. The silver-haired prisoner reacts with a look of wide-eyed shock.
A common straw broom is summoned within a glowing circle of magical energy.
Garrett gestures forward with a calm smile, commanding the object to move. The broom begins to sweep through the room, terrifying the other prisoners who scramble to get away. A sudden, sharp sounding follows the broom, battering the prisoners as they scream desperately for help. Helios looks on as the magical broom pins the unruly men to the floor.
Garrett keeps a firm hand on Helios while the broom continues its aggressive work in the background.
An illustration of a bow, a broom, a sword, and a dagger highlights the diversity of Garrett's manifestation powers.
Garrett explains that his guitar-type power allows him to use a portion of every ability, leaving Helios deeply suspicious of his true identity.
Helios's attention is suddenly drawn to a specific detail on the guard's face. A sudden, quick sounding follows Helios leaning in closer to investigate.
Helios asks if the mark on the guard's cheek is an injury.
Garrett is visibly amused by his student's unexpected show of concern.
A chibi Mintha gives a thumbs up while explaining she cut herself with a dagger to make her self-defense look convincing.
Helios confirms that he is truly worried about his instructor.
He expresses a sincere desire to ensure his teacher does not get hurt on his account.
Mintha looks on with a stunned expression, surprised by being addressed as a teacher.
Garrett dismisses the concern by claiming that avoiding injury is quite simple for him. The scene shifts to the cafeteria where inmates wonder if the facility has run out of meat or what caused the noise.
As night falls, rumors spread rapidly through the tower about a rookie guard knocking out a high-ranking prisoner. A bald elderly official slams his desk in a fit of rage over the open display of violence.
Mintha offers a nonchalant thumbs up, completely unfazed by the official's intense anger.
The man screams at her for failing to maintain a low profile as he instructed. Mintha dismisses his complaint, arguing that discretion was not an option given the circumstances. The senior official reminds Mintha that she is meant to be a designated guard, not a constant personal watchdog.
He argues that she should have allowed the prisoner to be beaten to maintain the tower's balance.
A flashback shows Helios in his prime, with the narrative noting he must face trials alone to grow.
The text describes the prison as a horrific hellscape filled with the most depraved individuals imaginable.
Helios is depicted standing amidst roses, a stark contrast to the dark and twisted nature of his surroundings.
Mintha looks on with a blank expression as the official calls her insane.
She suggests that if he disliked her methods, he should have handled the situation himself. The official notes that her personality remains as sharp and abrasive as ever despite her status.
He informs Mintha that her role within the tower will change starting the next day.
Mintha receives the news of her new assignment with quiet indifference. She acknowledges the dismissal and prepares to leave the grand office.
The official reflects on Mintha's lack of goals, concluding she is the perfect pawn for his plans. Mintha walks out of the office as the senior official watches her depart.
A knight chess piece symbolizes Mintha's role as a tool with nothing to lose. The scene shifts back to the library where the official ponders the lunatic's new role. A freckled rookie guard is baffled by a colleague's willingness to accept a harsh punishment.
A sudden, quick clink sounding follows the guard handing a heavy ring of keys to Garrett.
A close-up shows the iron keys shifting as Garrett accepts his weight.
Helios sits alone in the darkness of his prison cell, reflecting on his situation.
A guard commands Helios to step out of his current cell.
He is told he is being moved to a different cell as punishment for the earlier disturbance.
Helios enters a dusty, cobweb-filled cell and wonders if it is meant for 2 people.
A pair of feet in prisoner's shoes approaches as a voice confirms his presence.
Helios looks on in shock as Garrett is introduced as his new fellow inmate, now wearing handcuffs and a blue prisoner's uniform. Narrative text establishes that the mission to protect the target remains unchanged even while serving as a fellow prisoner.
Helios looks away with an expression of deep confusion. Garrett recalls his standing orders to guard the VIP around the clock. A guard informs the pair they are being moved to a shared cell for special management before entering the tower's 20th floor next week.
Helios reacts with wide-eyed shock as the guard offers to remove his handcuffs.
A sudden, loud clang sounding follows the heavy iron cell door being slammed shut.
Helios is frantic about their situation, while Garrett remains calm, stating things are exactly as described. Garrett wonders what his new title should be, while Helios snaps that names are currently irrelevant. Helios angrily argues that he is innocent and the other prisoners were the true aggressors. Garrett explains that the higher-ups simply want him confined, regardless of the status of the others. Helios protests the lack of fairness, but Garrett questions if he expected logic in such a place. Garrett dismisses the rookie's search for morality. Helios asks if his companion feels any resentment, but Garrett simply accepts responsibility for the trouble he caused.
Minthe reflects on the warden's satisfying plan despite the initial complications.
Narrative text reveals that being a prisoner allows Garrett to monitor and protect Helios more easily.
Moving a rookie from the 8th floor to the 20th is described as a literal death sentence.
Minthe acknowledges that she must accompany him.
Minth smugly prepares to carry the beginner through the upcoming challenges. Helios clutches his head in disbelief. Helios tells his companion to choose any name, while Garrett promises to act like a typical prisoner.
Garrett watches his charge with intensity.
Garrett suddenly seizes the silver-haired boson.
A confused rookie faces his instructor.
Helios blushes while questioning Garrett's unexpected actions.
Minthe watches the scene with a cold, piercing gaze.
Garrett notes that Helios's physical condition has deteriorated significantly due to frequent fighting.
Garrett asks if more injuries exist, as rumors of his protection caused further conflict. Garrett reaches out to check for bruises. Garrett lifts the boy's shirt to inspect a large bruise, ignoring his embarrassed protests. Garrett sternly demands to know who is responsible for the injuries.
Helios questions why his well-being matters to the former bard.
Garrett insists it matters because Helios suffered these wounds on his account.
Helios blushes, claiming Garrett is not at fault.
The two share a tense moment.
Helios shyly denies that anyone treated him that way.
Helios questions his companion's informal time.
Garrett argues that fellow inmates should speak comfortably, though Helios finds his persistence annoying.
Garrett pulls the boy close by his collar, their faces inches apart. Garrett issues a grim warning that failure to learn will result in death. Helios remains silent. The prisoner clenches his master's sleeve and submissively acknowledges his instructions.
Helios turns away in extreme bashfulness while holding his companion's hand. Minthe offers a chillingly satisfied smile while calling the boy good.
Garrett notes the difficulty of the 20th floor.
Garrett suggests that resentment is a valid response to being forced upward. Helios firmly states he harbors no ill will toward his master.
Garrett promises to be a diligent teacher despite the boy's shock at his sudden sincerity.
Garrett lies back on the bunk while Helios insists there is nothing to blame him for.
Garrett closes his eyes with a content smile while Helios tells him to stop. Garrett looks at Helios and tells him to come closer. Helios stands submissively over a defeated inmate as a voice commends his obedience.
A sudden, sharp ding sounding follows Garrett checking on the silver-haired boy as he wakes up confused. Garrett offers a sparkling smile while asking his disciple to turn off the lights.
Night settles over the dark stone tower by the sea.
Helios sleeps soundly in his prison bunk. The silver-haired boy reflects in the silence of the night. Garrett leans in to ask if Helios harbors any resentment.
Helios turns away, claiming he doesn't really feel any ill will.
A dark, bloody vision of a past charge haunts Helios's dreams. A man in a suit smiles over the memory of a burned village massacre.
Helios wakes with a sudden, sharp gasp following his nightmare.
He breathes heavily as cold sweat pours down the face.
Helios covers his face while vowing never to forgive his enemies. He promises to return to the duchy to take revenge on his father.
Helios looks out past the iron bars of his cell. A fierce determination to survive shines in the boy's purple eyes.
He vows to survive and achieve his revenge regardless of the cost.
Garrett wakes the next morning with a wide, stretching yawn. The brown-haired instructor notices Helios's somber mood. Garrett questions why he has a long face, but Helios dismisses the concern. Garrett claims the weather is nice, ignoring Helios's observation that there are no windows.
Helios reflects on Garrett's increasingly erratic and strange behavior since his demotion. Garrett casually explains that prisoners on this floor can enter the tower at will. Helios is frustrated by the late news as Garrett announces their departure for today.
The instructor offers a helpful tip for the upcoming trial. Garrett explains the necessity of having strong backing, leaving Helios puzzled. Helios dismisses Garrett's self-praising claim of being a great mentor as mere bragging. A sudden, heavy thud sounding follows Helios being yanked to the floor by a glowing rope.
Helios demands to know why he was suddenly attacked.
Garrett explains that unexpected attacks are part of his training to improve Helios's defense. He questions if Helios expected fairness and kindness from their enemies in the tower. Garrett explains his second tip, the absolute necessity of having capable allies. He uses a school of sardines as a metaphor for grouping together against predators.
Garrett shrugs playfully, hoping his student understood the gravity of the hint.
A magical portal manifests as they prepare to head to the tower.
The scene shifts to the 20th floor, which resembles a vast wheat field arena. Helios is baffled by the sight of grain fields within the tower.
Garrett stretches lazily while acclimating to the new environment. Garrett tells Helios to relax after the silver-haired boy snaps that he is being too calm. Garrett points out the presence of experienced re-challengers among the group.
Helios wonders how re-challengers exist if failing the trial results in death.
A sudden, loud boom sounding follows an announcement that the trial has officially begun. Helios watches in shock as fellow prisoners begin to vanish into thin air. Garrett explains that participants are separated into different spaces according to their skills.
He observes the surroundings, noting only first-time challengers remain in their section.
Garrett gives his student an encouraging thumbs up, telling him to try his best.
Helios reacts with visible disgust to Garrett's patronizing address. A sudden, sharp growl sounding follows massive, red-eyed hounds surrounding the group.
Helios readies a spear as he curses the arrival of the monsters.
A sudden, heavy crash sounding follows a nearby prisoner being knocked to the ground. A sudden, sharp growl sounding follows a red-haired prisoner begging for mercy as a hound attacks.
Helios stands protectively with his spear as his companion cringes in the wheat field.
The silver-haired boy remains alert as the trial intensifies.
A rookie points toward the brown-haired man, questioning why he is simply lounging during a battle.
Minthe winks while observing the chaos, pleased to play the role of a supportive mentor.
A sudden, heavy thud sounding follows Minthe striking a beast while praising her hidden ally.
The red-haired rookie expresses confusion over the brown-haired man's apparent uselessness.
The group continues to watch their companion with growing skepticism.
An orange-haired woman admits she has never seen anyone quite like the lazy prisoner.
Helios senses a shift in the atmosphere as more red-eyed hounds emerge from the shadows.
Minthe smugly ponders whether she should provide another hint to her student.
Helios dreads the prospect of fighting an endless wave of monsters. Garrett watches the unfolding struggle with a calm, observant gaze. A voice calls out the silver-haired boy's name.
Helios remains focused on the surrounding threats.
A sudden, sharp gasp sounding follows Helios realizing a new danger has appeared. The group panics as a massive swarm of hounds closes in on them. Helios realizes the upcoming threat is far more dangerous than a simple dog. A dark shadow looms over the silver-haired boy from behind.
A sudden, heavy crash sounding follows a spear being driven into a mysterious straw target.
Helios reacts with shock after noticing a massive clawed paw among the grain. The silver-haired boy fears he has reacted too late to the ambush. A sudden, loud whoosh sounding follows a blinding light as Minthe intervenes. A sudden, sharp crack sounding follows Minthe shattering a straw monster with her power. Garrett offers a sigh of relief while Helios looks on in disbelief.
A small purple-haired witch floats before a stone tower as the scene shifts.
Helios questions the true nature of the fallen straw enemy.
The silver-haired boy reflects on the close call.
Garrett praises Helios for his performance despite the difficulty. Narrative text explains that the true boss of the floor targets challengers from their blind spots. Helios realizes the earlier hounds were merely bait to distract them from the boss.
The silver-haired boy laments the sheer insanity of the tower's trials.
A system notification congratulates the survivors on making it through the hellish ordeal.
Garrett claps enthusiastically while announcing they have cleared the 20th floor.
Helios begrudgingly acknowledges that he would have perished without his master's help.
Garrett is moved by the perceived gratitude while Helios snaps that he was not being nice.
The brown-haired instructor reassures his student that taking down even one boss is impressive.
Minthe reflects on the unexpected appearance of a second boss and her need to step in.
Narrative text notes that the rookie party survived with only minor injuries.
The group of prisoners heads toward the exit of the wheatfield arena.
Helios pauses to look back at the site of the battle.
Determination flickers in the silver-haired boy's purple eyes.
Helios notices a large pile of fallen scarecrows exactly where his master had been standing.
Garrett stretches casually as Helios wonders about the true extent of his power.
A sudden low hum sounding follows the group entering the stone corridor.
Helios approaches Garrett with a serious question.
The silver-haired boy recalls the morning's training session when he was yanked to the floor.
Helios asks if the morning's surprise attack was meant to prepare him for the boss.
Garrett chuckles while commenting on the silver-haired boy's oses. Garrett leans in close to whisper a cryptic answer to his bewildered disciple.
Garrett leans in close and calls the white-haired boy kid.
Helios shouts to ask if the brown-haired man is seriously insane, while Garrett casually stretches and notes that his disciple is quick on the uptake.
Helios stands rigidly while his companion stretches with a relaxed expression.
The white-haired boy senses something and turns his head with a startled look. A red-haired man waves cheerfully while asking if Helios remembers him.
Helios confirms he remembers but asks if the man wasn't seriously wounded before.
A purple-haired witch floats near a text bubble explaining that from the 20th floor, all injuries are healed upon leaving the tower.
Helios asks what in surprise as Garrett smiles and confirms that is how it works. The red-haired man introduces himself as Gaiad Satane and thanks Helios for helping him survive earlier. A sudden, firm grip sounding follows the two men shaking hands in a show of camaraderie. Minthy watches the interaction, thinking that Helios is usually so prickly and is surprised he is actually replying. Minthy wonders if Helios is only prickly with her, as a narrator confirms she is right. Meanwhile, she asks Garrett if it is awkward that she was a guard, as a narrator calls Garrett the type who is unaware of his actions. Garrett laughs while saying it is nice to meet the red-haired man too. Gade gives a thumbs up while calling Helios amazing and manly, as Minthy notes that Helios is the type who randomly starts calling people names.
Garrett walks away, leaving Helios and Gaiad standing in confusion.
Helios asks why he is being ignored, but Garrett retorts by asking why he would bother responding. The white-haired boy stares in stunned silence. Garrett claims he is not really interested before telling Helios that the only one he cares about is him.
A sudden, sharp gasp sounding follows Helios reacting to the unexpected confession.
Helios shouts to ask what Garrett is doing, but Garrett clarifies he was referring to his master. Garrett notes that being misunderstood is hurtful while standing beside his disciple.
Helios wonders if Garrett is being serious right now. Helios nods while deciding it can't be helped, prompting Garrett to ask why he is nodding to himself.
Garrett adjusts his collar as Mintha reflects on her honest spots. Helios smiles warmly while thinking that his master just treated all the inmates kindly.
Minthe is momentarily dazed by Helios' smile, thinking that his face is seriously destructive.
Helios claims it's obviously not the case and points out that Mintha isn't his assigned inmate before reminding everyone that he is a guard.
Garrett reacts with a simple L. A group of prisoners is seen from behind in the stone corridor. Mintha reflects on her progress and assumes that Daryl and Ramona took good care of a companion. Garrett's eye widens in surprise at something he sees.
Helios asks what is with the look while surrounded by a background of flowns.
The two companions stand close together as Helios looks confused.
Garrett lets out a laugh while scoffing at the situation.
Garrett laughs while saying Helios looks like a kid who lost attention, then calls him a baby and tells him to go to his room, while Helios shouts for him to stop talking nonsense.
A mysterious silhouette observes the tower's interior from the shadows. A system notification declares that the trial is complete. A notification congratulates the duo on surviving the 23rd floor as Helios looks drained and Garrett remains cheerful.
Helios wonders why that thing has kept appearing since they reached the 21st floor.
Garrett asks if he is referring to the bug, but Helios frantically tells him not to say it.
Garrett asks if he is really scared of a bug as a giant cartoonish fly appears, and Helios covers his face while insisting that anyone would hate something so grotesquely huge.
Helios shouts to ask who Garrett is calling a baby. Gad leads his party toward the pair. Gade praises Garrett's use of a fly swatter as incredible, while Garrett dismisses the feat as Helios reacts with disgust. Garrett asks what the red-haired man wants.
Garrett notes that the group came swarming over and must have something to say as Gaiad hesitates. Gaiad and his party bow deeply while pleading for Garrett to teach them, calling him master, but Garrett flatly refuses. Gade is stunned as Garrett repeats his refusal and asks why he should teach them.
Gade mentions hearing that Garrett used to be a guard and is supposed to protect new prisoners. Garrett dismisses the reasoning and tells the group to leave and stop bothering him. A sudden, heavy thud sounding follows a foot striking the stone floor. Garrett advises the group to try the West Lounge if they are searching for a teacher. The orange-haired woman doubts that anyone will take them in regardless of where they go. Minthe wonders if Garrett is the one Daryl and Ramona refused to take because of his past actions. The orange-haired woman remains huddled in a state of quiet despair. A voice notes that the group's struggle is not their problem as they walk away. Garrett observes that Helios sounds like a villain, prompting the boy to ask if his master acted for his benefit or if he should have questioned the group's motives.
Helios explains that the group claimed no one would take them in.
Mintha notes that Helios is acting like a main character because the situation is clearly bothering him. Garrett reminds his disciple that this is a prison as they continue through the hallway. The brown-haired man smiles while stating there is no one here to pity or call a villain because everyone is scum. A sudden, sharp crack sounding follows an inmate being struck while a voice calls them worthless pests. An attacker demands the group hand over the woman behind them to be allowed to leave. The orange-haired woman stares in wide-eyed terror at the surrounding threats. The red-haired man begs for help while Helios and Garrett watch the assault from a distance. Garrett suggests they keep moving, much to the silver-haired boy's shock. Garrett asks why he should bother helping, leaving Helios at a loss for words. Helios claims he is a guard and simply cannot afford to get into trouble. Garrett leans in close to tell Helios not to forget that he is only here for him.
The brown-haired man adds that Helios is the only one he needs to worry about.
A blush creeps onto the silver-haired boy's face after the unexpected declaration.
A sudden, high-pitched scream sounding follows a woman's cry for help.
An attacker laughs while roughly grabbing the woman's hair to restrain her.
The woman begs for her captor to let her go.
Helios grits his teeth as he looks back at the unfolding violence.
Garrett claims he didn't raise his disciple to be weak enough to lose to scum like that.
Helios blushes deeply while insisting he was going to intervene whether his master said that or not.
The silver-haired boy rushes back toward the site of the struggle.
Minthe wonders who this new person is as the fight begins.
A sudden dull thud sounding follows Helios entering the fray with a strike.
Minthe recalls a woman asking her to promise to help anyone who is in trouble.
A young, blue-haired Minthe flatly refuses the request in her memory.
The silver-haired woman suggests only helping those within reach as a man is struck in the present. Minthe considers that everyone here is a criminal and questions why she should bother. The memory continues with the woman saying she just doesn't want Minthe to lose her humanity in this place.
Helios shouts with determination as he prepares to unleash his power.
Garrett watches the battle from the sidelines with a calm, folded-arm expression.
An attacker expresses shock that a low-rank prisoner like Helios can use special power.
A sudden, low groan sounding follows Helios struggling to maintain his energy. The inmates mock Helios, calling his ability a flimsy trick that won't last long.
Helios realizes the opponent is stronger than him and decides he must create an opening. An inmate refuses to lose his pride to someone he considers a low rank.
Helios spots an opening and readies a decisive, glowing strike. A sudden, loud crash sounding follows an attacker being sent flying backward from the impact.
The group panics and orders everyone to kill the boy, but Garrett interjects that he won't allow it. An attacker screams in agony while begging for someone to save him.
Garrett notes it has been a while since he used his bare hands while easily subduing the enemies.
The brown-haired man smiles while admitting the experience is actually quite disappointing. Helios points out that Garrett said he wasn't going to get involved. Garrett pulls his disciple close and explains that the master must step in when his pupil is getting beaten. Garrett asks why his disciple is blushing, but the boy claims he has no idea.
A red-haired guard remarks on the incident where Helios jumped into a fight in the cafeteria.
A sudden, quick tap sounding follows a guard's hands drumming on a stack of reports. The freckled guard submits that Helios's actions successfully caught the attention of the prison's higher-ups. Helios apologizes for his behavior, though his master notes he actually found it quite amusing. The guard questions which manual clause justifies Helios's intervention since he was not directly attacked. Garrett points out the manual clause permitting disciplinary action for hearing excessive insults or mockery. Minthe clarifies that while she did not hear the insults directly, the situation is more complex. Minthe explains that Ged's group was targeted specifically because of their association with Helios and Garrett. Helios suspects the attackers were spreading vile rumors about him and his master fooling around.
A sudden, low groan sounding follows a memory of Ged refusing to tolerate insults toward his savior.
Hyla admits she did something unnecessary and regrets the trouble, even though she wanted to show gratitude. Helios realizes that being involved with a high-profile new prisoner will lead to constant scrutiny. The freckled guard dismisses Helios, promising to take care of the formal disciplinary matter himself. Helios returns to the group, and Ged asks if there are any lingering problems from the meeting. Ged shouts to ask why Helios allows the other prisoners to continue following them. A sudden, loud shout sounding follows a prisoner thanking Helios profusely for his intervention. Helios tells the group to go away, claiming he did not help them on purpose. Helios gives a blunt refusal when the prisoners continue to linger behind him. Hyla asks if staying with them is really impossible, but Helios remains completely firm. Hyla's expression shifts as a mysterious, swirling energy begins to manifest around her. Helios is startled to realize that Hyla is actually a powerful mental-type ability user. A sudden, panicked shout sounding follows Garrett calling out to his disciple as energy flares. A sudden, sharp gasp sounding follows Helios clutching his head during a mental assault. Helios's eyes glow with a piercing green light as he resists the psychic pressure. Hyla pleads with Helios not to misunderstand the true purpose of her ability. Hyla gestures frantically while explaining she was only trying to let him know what she heard. Hyla reveals she was using telepathy to inform Helios about the vile rumors being spread. Brilliant streaks of golden energy rain down from the ceiling upon the gathered prisoners. The prisoners cry out in terror as the powerful energy strikes them with crushing force. Garrett declares his intense dislike for anything that falls out of his absolute control. A sudden, firm snatch sounding follows Garrett grabbing Helios by the front of his uniform. Helios gasps for air while trying to ask his master for a brief moment to speak. Helios pleads with his master to help the group instead of punishing them for their actions. Helios argues that the group only got into this mess because they stood up for them. Garrett remains cold, dismissing the group's struggles as none of their concern or responsibility. Garrett pins Helios down, reminding him that even if they stood up for them, they owe nothing. Garrett leans in close to declare that he is a person who exists solely for Helios.
Helios asks why his master is being so stubborn about refusing to help the group.
Helios struggles against a glowing collar, reminding Garrett that he was told to make comrades. Helios insists that he is trying to follow the advice Garrett gave him regarding allies. The rest of the group watches the master and disciple with looks of pure terror. Garrett's mouth quirks into a subtle, knowing smile as he watches Helios's resolve. A sudden, sharp shatter sounding follows the glowing collar on Helios's neck breaking apart. Garrett presents Helios as the true leader the other prisoners must follow from now on.
The prisoners eagerly accept their new leader, and Garrett orders them to introduce themselves.
Garrett activates Mind's Eye, evaluating Ged Satine as a strong musculoskeletal type with decent potential.
Hyla introduces herself, and Garrett notes her impressive mental talents, specializing in illusions and telepathy. Seth Kurgan introduces himself nervously, hiding a material-type power that even surprises the master. Brett Bomer introduces himself with a cheerful greeting, completing the new group of followers. Mintha reflects on the group's surprising combination while resting her chin on her chin. The blue-haired woman considers that their skills are perfect for supporting a male protagonist. Minthe wonders if the silver-haired boy's knack for choosing allies is the power of a world protagonist. Jed addresses Hyla by name, prompting a simple acknowledgement from the orange-haired woman. Seth warns Hyla not to provoke Helios again, threatening that she won't get a second chance. Hyla questions the true nature of the bond between Helios and his master. Helios tells her that the details of their relationship are none of her concern. A deep blush creeps onto the boy's face as he claims his master lacks common sense. Chibi Garrett protests being called senseless, while Helios blames the master's misleading way of speaking. Garrett asks why his disciple is being informal again, as Hyla wonders about a pre-awakening state. Seth struggles with a complex, glowing magical circle that appears to be straining his limits. Helios claps cheerfully while Seth groans in despair during their intense training session. Ged asks Helios if the training has always been this demanding and brutal. Ged whispers that the current method is malicious while the master orders the injured to be treated. Seth points to himself in shock after being told he possesses a hidden healing ability. Seth claims to be a telekinesis user, but the master insists he simply hasn't awakened yet. Helios dismisses Seth's confusion, stating he has a specific way to force the boy's awakening. A sudden, wet cough sounding follows Helios telling Seth his comrades will die if he doesn't heal them. Seth laments that being forced to witness his dying friends is too much, even as a hallucination. Seth screams as his power flares while Helios prepares the next trial. Hyla watches in disgust. Helios worries the group lacks training as Chibi Seth collapses and claims he can't do it. Helios pushes Hyla to use her mental powers harder against enemies with high mental resistance. The narrator notes training is smooth as the group rests after clearing the tower's 24th floor. Minthe gazes at the tower's dark exterior, noting the 25th floor will be much harder. A sudden sharp axe sounding follows a monster's insect-like leg being seen in the dark. Someone asks what a fallen, tattered scarecrow is as they investigate the floor. Ged and Helios stand back to back, wondering why the victory sound hasn't triggered yet. Garrett observes that the challenge is obviously far from over as he stands with folded arms. The brown-haired man gives a subtle, knowing smile while watching the unfolding scene. A sudden, loud rumble sounding follows a massive stone wall sliding open to reveal a hidden crowd. Jed asks if the floor features other challengers as a group of prisoners emerges from the smoke. Helios readies his spear while asking if these people are their final opponents for the floor. Helios is surprised as Garrett walks forward into the path of the new arrivals. Mintha notes the enemies are skilled and numerous, deciding she will handle one side herself. Helios calls out to ask where his master is going as the man walks away. Garrett claims the current situation is too much for his disciple's current skill level. Helios asks with concern if his master intends to kill the opposing group of people.
Garrett raises his hands while confirming that killing is the sole purpose of this war.
The tower's demand for survival through killing is stated as Garrett faces his enemies. A sudden, pained axe sounding follows a prisoner being strangled as the final survivor. A sudden, dull thud sounding follows Garrett dropping his victim while Helios watches in shock. A system notification congratulates the wild dogs for successfully completing the trial. The narrator explains that while failures get a next chance, victors proceed to a pleasant hell. The narrator notes the contradiction in a tower where failure inevitably leads to death. Ged admits he didn't expect the master to step up and take charge at the very end. Seth and Brett are ecstatic, praising Garrett for being an amazing and cool leader. Helios looks at his cheering comrades with a look of deep confusion and unease. Ged and Hyla celebrate their survival today and thank the group for their efforts. Helios wonders why everyone is so happy despite the fact that people died during the trial.
Ged and Brett wonder if Helios truly doesn't understand the harsh reality of their world.
Ged points toward a nearby occurrence and asks Helios to take a look at it. A man is shocked to find someone alive who he was certain had died recently. Helios explains that after the 20th floor, all injuries and deaths are undone once trials end. Helios sits alone in the dark, troubled by his master's decision to hide the revival rule. Helios confronts his master, asking why such a critical piece of information was kept secret. Garrett points out that they could have progressed sooner and wonders why Helios is so gloomy.
Helios insists that his master must understand the tower's hellish nature to maintain their will.
Garrett reflects on the endless, brutal cycle of killing and dying that defines the tower's ascent. Mintha is shown in a dark void as Garrett explains that death offers no true escape. Garrett laments how the tower breaks its prisoners, causing them to lose things they can't recover. Garrett tells his disciple he hopes he can reach the top without dying even a single time.
Helios stares into the distance, pondering what kind of reality awaits them at the tower's peak.
Garrett gives a small, knowing smile while watching the silver-haired boy's internal struggle. Garrett explains that reaching the top is the only way to finally escape this living hell. Garrett's intense expression emphasizes the grim reality of their survival in the tower. A sudden, soft rustle sounding follows Helios catching a fleeting vision of a teal-haired woman. A woman with incredibly long teal hair stands with a divine-looking halo glowing behind her. Helios is left stunned and confused, wondering if he just witnessed a mysterious apparition. The teal-haired woman sits silently in the distance while Helios watches her from behind.
Garrett suddenly calls out to his disciple, asking what he is staring at so intently. Helios reacts with panic, wondering if his vision was merely a vivid, sleep-deprived hallucination.
Garrett tells Helios to stop daydreaming and sleep, warning that tomorrow will be exhausting.
A heavy blush spreads across Helios's face as he remains flustered by the vision.
Helios clutches his chest in confusion, wondering why his heart is racing so fast.
On the 28th floor, the group faces giant mantises as Hyla calls for immediate assistance. Helios coordinates the team's attack, ordering Seth to follow him in exactly 3 seconds. Garrett observes the group's progress, noting their individual skills and teamwork have improved significantly. A sudden, loud rumble sounding follows a massive stone wall sliding open to reveal rivals. A system notification explains that incapacitating the opposing party is sufficient to clear the floor.
Helios's party decides to focus on knocking their opponents out rather than killing them. Minth shrugs while noting that non-lethal combat is actually making things harder for the group.
A sudden, spirited shout sounding follows the group launching their coordinated final assault. A sudden, dull thud sounding follows an opponent falling unconscious on the floor. The group celebrates clearing the 28th floor, expressing relief at having survived the trial. A sudden, cheerful laugh sounding follows Ged hugging Helios and praising his leadership decision. Garrett notes that while the climb is smooth, Helios is becoming a new kind of problem.
A sudden, sharp flinch sounding follows Garrett approaching Helios and startling the boy.
Helios turns to his master and asks what is on his mind. Garrett observes Helios silently, reflecting on the boy's strange behavior over the past few days. Seth jokingly asks if Garrett has been secretly beating up his disciple lately.
Garrett quips that he hasn't done so recently, which only deepens Seth's playful suspicion.
Seth tells the pair to keep their lovers' quarrels to a minimum before walking away. Garrett wonders if Seth is just jealous and wants to receive more direct training himself. Helios suddenly turns to his master and asks if he happens to have a sister. Minthi is baffled by the question, thinking Helios should be focused on battle strategy instead. Helios admits he has a younger sister, prompting Garrett to ask if she looks like him. Helios explains their differences, mimicking his sister's slanted eyes with a humorous gesture. Helios adds that despite their differences, he has always thought his sister was quite pretty.
Helios blushes deeply and tells his master to never mind, feeling embarrassed by the topic.
Helios finishes the thought by noting that his sister's hair is long enough to reach her waist. Helios lies alone on his bed in the prison cell, looking deeply contemplative. Helios reflects on the teal-haired woman's long hair and finds himself wishing his master's hair was long as well. A sudden, sharp axe sounding follows Helios's internal realization that he might be losing his mind. Helios wonders what on earth could be going through his head to make him think such strange things. A sudden, startled gasp sounding follows Helios being surprised by his master appearing with a towel over his head. Garrett asks why his disciple is staring at him so strangely just because he recently washed up.
Helios tries to calm himself down, dismissing his earlier thoughts as mere sleep-deprived nonsense.
Helios firmly reminds himself that they are both men and should not be having such awkward thoughts. Garrett leans in close and calls his disciple's name to snap him out of his daze.
A sudden, startled "what" sounding follows Garrett, noting that Helios is acting quite weird.
Garrett points out that his disciple has been looking remarkably pale for quite some time now.
Garrett asks if Helios has been struggling to sleep, while the boy insists he is sleeping just fine.
Garrett jokingly asks if Helios wants him to stay awake all night and watch him sleep.
Helios reacts with complete shock, asking his master if he is actually being serious about such an offer.
The teal-haired woman is shown as the narrator warns the next floor will be too difficult for the boy.
Helios admits he hasn't been sleeping well, leading Garrett to sigh at his difficult disciple.
Garrett offers to knock him unconscious to help him get some deep sleep, which Helios finds terrifying.
Garrett assures him he is good at controlling his strength, but Helios begs him to stop making scary jokes.
Garrett reflects on the situation and decides there is only one method left to help his disciple. Garrett instructs Helios to lie down as he prepares a more direct way to help him rest.
Garrett climbs into bed, claiming shared body heat is helpful for sleep, a tip he learned from his mother.
A flashback shows the teal-haired woman hugging a child as Garrett explains his source of advice.
Garrett tells Helios to get some sleep now to prepare for the exhausting day ahead of them. Garrett whispers a gentle nighty-night while Helios remains wide awake and flustered.
Helios stares at his sleeping master, his face burning with a deep and intense blush.
Helios's eye reflects his internal turmoil as he watches the man sleeping peacefully beside him.
The pair fall asleep together in the cramped bed while decorative flowers bloom around the front. A freckled man in a blue uniform and cap sits behind a large desk in a formal office.
The official informs Garrett that no one will be permitted to enter the area for a while. Garrett questions if the leadership among the tower's prisoners has undergone a recent change. A narration box introduces the highest-ranking prisoner, known as the King of the Inmates. The narrator explains that the tower's leader wields a significant and dangerous amount of influence.
The narrator adds that these leaders possess the power to partially interfere with the tower's trials.
A circus ring with puppet versions of characters appears as the narrator mentions tower maintenance. Garrett notes the official has memorized the manual well, and the man mentions his prior training. The teal-haired woman is shown as the narrator describes the difficulty of facing a new leader. The official leans back in his chair and asks Garrett if he knows who the new leader is. Garrett admits he isn't certain, but mentions rumors that the new leader is a woman. Garrett remains deep in thought, considering the implications of this mysterious new female leader. The group arrives at the 29th floor and stands stunned by the strange field before them. The silhouettes of the team are seen standing amidst a vast and eerie field of blood-red wheat. Helios asks about the red field, and Garrett notes the new leader must be quite fond of blood. Garrett warns the entire group to be extremely cautious as they begin exploring the new floor. A system notification warns that the boss on this floor is entirely different from the previous ones. A sudden wet huff sounding follows several large dark snakes emerging from the red wheat field. Garrett observes one of the snakes and notes that the creature is capable of spewing toxic gas. Garrett wonders if this is what his older brother was referring to in his previous warnings. A sudden, sharp gasp sounding follows Garrett reacting to a sudden movement in the dark field. Garrett turns to the group and confirms that they are currently safe from any immediate danger. A brilliant golden light suddenly emanates from Garrett, illuminating the dark stone walls of the floor. Garrett tells everyone to stay back and rest while a blinding white light fills the area. A sudden, sharp arg sounding follows the group reacting with shock as a massive explosion of light erupts.
A sudden, pained kuh sounding follows Seth being knocked backward by the sheer force of the blast.
Seth complains about the rough treatment while noting that Helios was the only one who landed gently. Garrett teasingly calls Helios a precious princess, leading the silver-haired boy to shout back in embarrassment.
Garrett smiles and tells the group that they have had enough chatter for now. Garrett stares down a massive, menacing snake and decides it is time to take care of it. Helios watches from behind and wonders what kind of creature they are facing as the snake looms over Garrett. Helios is horrified as he watches venomous liquid drip from the fangs of the giant dark serpent.
Garrett notes the creature is toxic enough to kill upper-floor inmates and questions the floor's absurd level of difficulty.
Garrett crackles with golden energy and wonders how Helios managed to deal with such overwhelming power until now.
Garrett recalls a conversation with the official who mentioned that things are becoming chaotic as high-ranking inmates continue to die. Garrett reflects on how the tower's difficulty level has undergone an abnormal and dangerous change. A sudden, high-pitched screech sounding follows Garrett unleashing a massive blast of golden energy that consumes the giant snake. A sudden, soft ha sounding follows Garrett smiling with satisfaction after defeating the floor's monstrous guardian. In another part of the tower, a purple-haired woman hums to herself while walking through a quiet hallway. The purple-haired woman stops by a door and wonders if there is still no news regarding their current situation. The woman stands before a set of ornate doors and tells her companion not to bother asking her for answers.
Doris and Daryl express their frustration over the warden's choices and question if their new leader is fit for the role.
A boy with an eye patch informs his companion that they are being hunted by a woman who intends to kill everyone. Ramona enters the room with a cheerful greeting, noting that the other inmates have been doing their best to avoid her. Ramona feigns being hurt by their avoidance as a system box identifies her as the tower's new leader. Ramona stands over her victims and asks if they are enjoying the new, deadly difficulties she has prepared for them.
Daryl angrily confronts Ramona, accusing her of designing the floor's trials specifically to kill every single prisoner.
Ramona smiles and argues that only the strongest individuals on each floor should have the right to survive.
Daryl accuses Ramona of destroying the established system, but the new leader dismissively asks why that would be a problem.
Ramona notes that it's unfortunate the previous leader isn't around to voice any complaints about the changes. Ramona continues walking through the area and asks if the former leader has made any sign of returning yet.
Ramona blushes and expresses how thrilling it would be to finally face the person she replaced. Daryl and the blue-haired boy watch in stunned silence, internally cursing the new leader's twisted and insane personality. Ramona tells Daryl that they are all the same and suggests they find a way to play until the leader returns.
The massive snake lies motionless on the ground, defeated by the overwhelming power of Garrett's earlier assault. Garrett holds his glowing golden sword and thinks to himself that the battle didn't feel particularly satisfying. Seth sits on the ground in disbelief and asks Garrett if he is actually human after seeing such an easy victory. Helios stares at Garrett's back and finds the sheer magnitude of his master's power to be completely overwhelming.
Narration describes Garrett's power as something so massive it feels as vast and imposing as the giant tower itself.
Helios continues to watch Garrett in silence, wondering about his master's true identity and the source of his strength.
A close-up of Helios's purple eye captures his intense focus and confusion as he considers his master's power.
Garrett remains silent as he turns his head, his expression hidden as he processes the aftermath of the fight.
A vision of the teal-haired woman with striking red eyes reappears, looking back with a solemn expression. Garrett and the mysterious woman stand opposite each other in a bright void as a single word echoes through the space.
The teal-haired woman stands behind Garrett as they remain linked by a lingering connection from the past. Helios is startled out of his trance as Garrett calls his name to snap him back to reality.
Garrett notices his disciple's pale expression and asks if he's seen a ghost, while Helios wonders why these visions keep appearing. Helios remains deeply troubled, wondering why he continues to see strange and inexplicable things over and over again. A sudden startled axe sounding follows Garrett grabbing Helios and pulling him back toward the bed to rest. A sudden panicked eek sounding follows Helios struggling against Garrett's grip while his master tells him to sleep tight. Helios lies awake in bed and notes that his master is already sleeping soundly like a rock.
Helios turns his head to look at Garrett, his earlier confusion still lingering as he watches the man sleep.
Helios finds a small sense of comfort in noting that his master looks remarkably peaceful while he is sleeping.
Helios wakes up in a sudden panic while his master Garrett continues to sleep soundly.
Helios remains completely flustered as he watches Garrett's peaceful and untroubled face.
Helios is covered in sweat, his purple eyes wide with an intense and growing sense of distress. Helios stares at his hand and recalls seeing a mysterious teal color just moments ago.
Garrett stretches in the red wheat field while Helios questions if he is starting to lose his mind. Other prisoners greet the pair, relieved that they managed to survive the Flora's deadly trials once again.
The prisoners complain about almost dying and express their deep hatred for the Flora's monstrous snakes.
Helios is confused by the mention of bright red venom, knowing the snake they fought had black venom. Garrett leans in behind Helios, his expression calm while his disciple remains lost in thought. A sudden quiet shh sounding follows Garrett putting a finger to his lips to silence Helios. Garrett confirms they faced a harder level, noting that black venom only appears on the tower's higher floors.
Helios shouts back in embarrassment, demanding that Garrett stop calling him a kid.
Helios looks away while continuing to process the strange information about the floor's difficulty. Helios remains flustered by Garrett's playful attitude while they continue their journey. Garrett admits that he uses his powers sometimes, but claims he isn't really a fan of them. Garrett notes that his master prefers sneaky attacks, leaving Helios unable to tell if he's joking or serious. A woman with orange hair asks Helios why he has been muttering to himself for so long. Helios is confused as the woman explains that she only heard his voice during the entire conversation.
Helios is shocked to realize that Garrett was using a telepathic trick to speak to him alone.
Helios declines an offer for water from another prisoner, insisting that he is perfectly fine. A sudden soft giggle sounding follows Garrett laughing at his disciples' growing frustration.
Helios tells Garrett to shut it while decorative flowers bloom around the pair's playful bickering. Voices in the background discuss the shower schedule while the group prepares to rest.
Garrett sits down on a bench, finally alone with his own private thoughts.
Garrett reflects on the tower's insane difficulty while a vision of the teal-haired woman appears before him.
A flashback shows a massacre, with the narrator noting the difficulty is similar to when the tower was first climbed.
A silhouette is shown as the narrator explains how a bloodthirsty psycho once led the prisoners.
Garrett remains deep in thought, considering the implications of the tower's current deadly state.
Garrett taps his finger against his leg while he continues to reflect on their dangerous situation.
Garrett decides he needs to contact the warden, believing a sane person wouldn't leave such difficulty unchecked.
Garrett wonders how he can manage to contact the warden while being stuck inside the prison. A narration box explains that the tower is functioning exactly as intended for a high-security prison.
The narrator adds that most communication methods are unable to function properly within these stone walls.
Garrett pulls back his sleeve to reveal a thin, dark bracelet hidden around his wrist.
Garrett reflects on posing as himself and reveals that he is even concealing his power's unique color. Garrett thinks about how much easier things would be if he simply returned to his original form.
Garrett notes that Helios will soon wake up while a vision of a red-eyed soldier appears.
Garrett expresses his intense hatred for the soldier and vows not to get caught by him.
A sudden, long ha sounding follows Garrett letting out a weary sigh as he sits in the dark.
Garrett touches his bracelet and decides he has no choice but to contact the warden immediately.
A brilliant, glowing light surrounds Garrett as a magical transformation begins to take place.
Garrett notes how long it has been since he was last able to inhabit his original body.
The transformation is complete, revealing a beautiful teal-haired woman with striking red eyes. The woman creates a sphere of blue energy while noting that now is not the time for distractions.
She summons a glowing blue sprite named Vix and instructs it to deliver a message to the warden.
The small sprite flies out between the iron bars of the prison to carry out its task.
The woman finds it exhausting to hide her true presence from the person with mental skills. She watches the sprite disappear and thinks that she now only needs to wait for a reply.
A sudden, sharp click sounding follows the woman reacting with shock as she realizes someone is watching her.
Helios stands in the doorway with a towel over his shoulder, having caught his master in her true form.
Helios remains frozen in shocked silence. A tense, wordless standoff follows the sudden revelation. The teal-haired woman confirms she is indeed the master. She explains she expected him to arrive eventually, but not in this specific manner. Helios continues to stare in utter disbelief. A sudden, quiet rub sounding follows Helios rubbing his eyes to process what he's seeing. Helios asks where his master has gone, still confused by the woman's presence. The master smiles and considers that knocking him out might be her best option.
Helios stammers in confusion while trying to make sense of the situation.
The teal-haired woman covers her mouth to hide her expression.
Helios reflects on how unique and beautiful the color of his master's chi is. A sudden, soft swoosh sounding follows the master reacting to Helios's observation.
Helios approaches her while wondering if he is currently trapped in a dream.
The woman leans in playfully and asks if she is his type. Helios is completely overwhelmed with embarrassment at her suggestion.
Helios frantically denies the implication while the master waits for Vix to return.
Helios blurts out that his master is his type right as she prepares to strike him.
A sudden, sharp tap sounding follows the woman striking Helios on the forehead.
Helios collapses into her arms while she regrets speaking her thoughts out loud.
Helios falls unconscious onto the mattress.
The master grumbles about how heavy he is.
She admits she lacks common sense while repeating Helios's embarrassing confession.
Helios remains fast asleep and untroubled on the bed.
The master decides it is best to make him forget everything he just saw.
A sudden, bright flash sounding follows the master using magic to erase Helios's memories. The small sprite Vix returns to its master's side. Garrett checks the message while thinking about the report from the warden. Garrett is scolded for causing trouble while receiving the secret communication.
The report states that the ruler of the 100th floor has been replaced.
The current boss was reportedly not chosen through standard procedures. There are only 2 recognized ways to become the floor's ruler. The first way involves passing the trial when the position is vacant. The second way is to kill the existing boss and take their place.
The report identifies Clark as the master's successor. Clark did not die but is currently in critical condition.
The master wonders if such survival is even possible in this place. Higher-ups are planning to negotiate with the new boss very soon. Garrett is told to ignore the politics and stay focused on the task at hand. He is reminded that he, of all people, should know what failure means. The master begins to summarize the new information she's gathered. The third point notes that the warden is unhappy with the change. Garrett counts down the remaining points of a report.
Garrett reflects on the situation while sitting alone in his cell.
He notes that the sender has no intention of revealing the boss's identity.
He weighs the possibilities of the boss being a lunatic or a threat to the mission. He worries that the new boss might jeopardize the entire mission.
The sun rises over the prison as Helios wakes up with a loud scream the next day. Helios sits up in a cold sweat while Garrett asks what's wrong.
Helios wonders if he just had a particularly bad nightmare.
A sudden hot blush sounding follows Helios turning bright red as Garrett asks if he is sick. Garrett questions if the blushing Helios is sick, but his disciple insists he is perfectly fine.
Helios hides his face in his hands, admitting he spoke strangely during a dream.
Helios screams in internal agony at the memory of his master's face during his confession.
Garrett assumes it was just a dream, while Helios struggles to regain his composure amidst blooming flowers.
Helios yells in frustration as he wonders what has been wrong with him lately. Helios sits in a daze while his master watches him with a silent, curious expression.
Helios stares at his palms while his master continues to wonder about his strange behavior.
Helios wonders if his preferences have changed, though the narrator quickly dismisses the incorrect conclusion.
Garrett tells him to move past his crisis and get out of bed immediately. Helios questions what kind of interests he even possesses.
A tiny Garrett head insists it is not his problem and tells him to get up.
A sudden sharp clack sounding follows the tray being set down as the scene shifts to the cafeteria.
Helios stares blankly at his food while resting his chin on his hand.
Garrett asks what is wrong while they sit together in the dining hall.
Garrett notes Helios has been acting weird.
Garrett asks if he is hitting puberty since he is acting shy, causing Helios to slam the table in denial.
Garrett asks why he is avoiding eye contact, and Helios claims he was merely lost in thought.
Garrett looks at him curiously and asks what he was thinking about.
Helios recalls the battle with the snake and reflects on how much further he must go.
Garrett asks if that was all, while Helios looks slightly disheartened. Helios continues to stare while a small star effect appears over his head.
Garrett reaches out his hand while roses bloom, asking why his disciple is so discouraged.
Garrett tilts his disciple's face up and says he cherishes him, though Helios demands he let go.
The teal-haired woman reflects on the effort she poured into training her student. A narration box explains that on the tower's lower floors, Helios has already become nearly unmatched. A tiny version of the teal-haired woman looks incredibly proud of her accomplishments. Garrett reflects on how caring only for his own success would make his life much simpler. Garrett holds his disciple's chin and notes he likes him because he doesn't belong in such a dark place.
Helios asks how much longer his master intends to cling to him. A sudden soft tap sounding follows Garrett deciding this attitude is better than his disciple sulking.
A sudden light slap sounding follows Helios telling his master to let go while Garrett giggles. Helios sits with his hands in his lap while his master expresses confusion over his reaction. Garrett stands before his disciple while surrounded by a decorative border of flowers. Garrett leans in and asks if his disciple wants to protect him. A sudden soft giggle sounding follows Garrett smiling warmly at his disciple's reaction. Garrett admits he cannot protect him, which prompts his disciple to tell him to forget the conversation. A sudden light pat sounding follows Garrett placing a hand on his disciple's head.
A decorative box frame appears as Garrett vows to ensure his disciple does not die.
Garrett smiles and encourages him to keep going until they reach the tower's summit.
Helios turns bright red and shouts in shock at his master's sudden encouragement.
Garrett asks if he is angry or hitting puberty again while Helios yells at him. Garrett explains that he is not very sociable because he is terrible at reading people. Garrett demands his disciple acknowledge his words while surrounded by decorative sparkles. Helios rubs his head and sighs while his master's playful attitude continues.
A group of other prisoners is shown in a vision of admiration.
The teal-haired woman considers that in this place, admiration is often replaced by usefulness. Garrett notes that many people flock to him, but his disciple asks why he is so popular. Helios coughs and tells his master to forget he ever mentioned it. Helios clenches his fist and admits that he admires his master's strength. Helios looks away while mentioning he has one more thing to say. Helios looks away with a blush and admits he doesn't usually admire people. Garrett responds to his disciple's confession with a dismissive and nonchalant shrug.
Helios yells in frustration as he insists that he is not easily impressed by others. Helios covers his face while complaining that nobody understands what he is trying to say.
Garrett gives a cheerful thumbs up and promises to take responsibility for making Helios strong.
Helios screams in absolute denial as the scene around him fades into a dark void.
The scene shifts as the group arrives on the 30th floor of the town. A dark and ominous castle stands tall under the purple hues of a sunset. Helios and his companions flee down a dimly lit hallway as a scream echoes. Seth clings to the red-haired man while panicking about the terrifying surroundings. The red-haired man realization hits that they are completely trapped within the hallway. Seth weeps while repeating how scary the current situation has become. Seth reflects on a past promise to never set foot on this floor again.
Helios watches the long-haired man panicking and notes how overwhelmed he seems.
Helios looks around in concern and wonders where his master has disappeared to.
A floating dartboard appears in the air to announce the start of the trial.
The prisoners question the purpose of the dartboard just as a pin flies toward them.
A sudden sharp stab sounding follows a dart piercing Seth directly in the chest.
The group panics, but Seth realizes he is unharmed and the dart has vanished.
The orange-haired woman asks Seth if he is really okay despite the strange attack.
A sudden, choked gasp sounding follows the dartboard transforming into a monstrous, toothy mouth.
The monster taunts them and suggests they play a fun game of hide-and-seek. The group worries they have been thrust into a scenario like a horror novel. The red-haired man wonders how they suddenly ended up inside a mansion. Garrett points a finger towards Seth while calling out to get his attention.
Seth admits that he is most afraid of ghosts and murderers from horror stories.
A dark, shadowy figure looms within the frame of a nearby open doorway.
A terrifying figure wearing a blood-stained paper bag mask and holding an axe appears.
A narration bubble notes that this situation is going to be very troublesome.
A piercing scream rings out from the castle as the sun begins to set.
A sudden, heavy crunch sounding follows the paper bag killer striking down with his axe.
The orange-haired woman and red-haired man watch the creepy masked figure in the distance.
Helios recalls how his spear passed right through the killer as if he were a ghost.
Seth recognizes the figure and mentions that they must reach a safe room to survive.
Seth identifies the masked killer as a character from a horror novel he once read.
Helios and Garrett look at Seth with expressions of utter disbelief and confusion.
Helios suspects that his master already knows the secret behind this strange trial.
Garrett playfully praises his disciple for correctly identifying Seth as the key to the trial.
The master explains that this floor replicates the specific fears of those who enter.
A narration box explains that endless death and bloodshed often shatter the minds of prisoners. The teal-haired master considers that this is the perfect way to break someone mentally. She watches the masked figure and thinks that something feels off about the killer.
Helios looks back toward his master while wondering what their next move should be.
Garrett stretches his arms and suggests that this trial might be too difficult for them.
A sudden, soft grin sounding follows Garrett deciding to scout the area on his own.
The dark-haired man holds a finger to his lips and tells the others to be quiet. He smiles with relief and notes that they have bought themselves a little more time.
The orange-haired woman worries that it's only a matter of time before the killer returns. They realize they have become characters in the horror novel manifested from Seth's fears. Seth huddles on the floor in terror while muttering that he is going to be killed. The orange-haired woman decides she has no choice but to give it a try. Seth laughs hysterically while insisting that he is not even a little bit scared.
Hyla is told not to drive her teammate to a breakdown, but she yells at them to shut up as she tries to suppress her own fear.
Seth points ahead and shouts that the ghost killer can be sealed within the basement.
Seth cheers with his arms raised while the teal-haired man notes that people who snap always have that look.
Helios orders everyone to hold their positions as they prepare for the next move. The group prepares to head for the basement.
A sudden, heavy creak sounding follows Seth, noting the basement door is already standing open.
Helios stands frozen as a wave of sudden realization hits him.
The paper bag killer looms in the hallway while Helios realizes this is where the group went. Seth frantically points toward the altar and shouts that grabbing the candle holder and chanting the spell will seal the killer.
Helios orders the team to spread out and reach the altar while the killer lets out a soft giggle.
A sudden, loud whoosh sounding follows Helios charging forward to protect his ally while shouting his determination.
A sudden, sharp slice sounding follows the killer being struck by a powerful blow.
The paper bag killer swings wildly, forcing a sudden pained grunt sounding from his target.
Seth trembles in terror as the killer's massive silhouette looms over him.
Seth recoils in horror while Helios moves in to block the killer's relentless assault.
Helios shouts at Seth to run for his life immediately. Helios struggles to hold back the killer with his spear. Helios stares at the killer in confusion, wondering why he is acting so strangely. A sudden, metallic clang sounding follows the killer's attack as Helios curses his failing weapon. Helios realizes his spear is on the verge of shattering and desperately needs a stronger weapon. Helios envisions a better weapon as a glowing blade begins to manifest.
A sudden, bright hum sounding follows Helios grasping a powerful, glowing sword. Helios raises the radiant sword high, preparing for a final, decisive strike.
Helios delivers a devastating slash with a thunderous battle cry. Seth triumphantly holds up the candle holder and shouts that he has finally sealed the monster. Helios notices the warped space around them is finally returning to its normal state. Helios looks around the quiet room with a suspicious expression.
Helios reaches for the discarded paper bag mask and notes that the ordeal is over.
The killer removes his mask to reveal the brown-haired master who playfully questions Helios's sudden polite tone.
Helios asks what his master is doing, and the brown-haired man jokes about playing the role of a final boss. A narration box explains that the boss was far too strong for Helios's team to handle alone. The master admits he defeated the boss for training and wonders how Helios recognized him despite the illusions.
Helios simply replies that he could tell just by looking.
A vision of the Master Garrett appears, surrounded by beautiful blooming flowers.
Helios thinks to himself that if it is his master, he will always be able to recognize him.
Helios continues to stare at his master's disguised form with a serious gaze.
The brown-haired man praises his disciple's sharp intuition and offers his congratulations for clearing the floor.
Helios calls out to his master in a soft, quiet voice.
Helios explains that he only knew it was him because he is his master.
Helios turns a deep shade of red as he is overcome with a sudden surge of embarrassment.
A narration bubble reflects on the weight of being told he is someone special.
The group arrives at the top-floor waiting room where prisoners are shouting in anger and refusal.
Helios notes the other challengers are causing a scene as the master explains the floor is themed around fear.
Helios watches in silence as a group of prisoners begins to act aggressively.
A prisoner is beaten while the brown-haired master wonders if scouting season has already begun.
Helios looks on in confusion and asks what the other prisoners are doing.
A title card introduces the concept of scouting among the prisoners. Narration explains that Niflheim is divided into multiple internal factions known as families or fams.
Narration explains that guards do not interfere with prisoners fighting each other.
Narration notes that families scout for promising newcomers starting on certain floors.
The teal-haired master notes that while retaliation for refusal is forbidden, the floor is already a mess.
Narration notes that Helios has become a person of interest for all families. A smiling man with an undercut hairstyle and multiple earrings approaches to ask a question. A sudden, heavy thud sounding follows the undercut man being struck by a powerful punch.
The brown-haired man notes that the instructor who struck the blow is still on the guard roster.
Chica identifies himself and the undead-looking man as he points toward Helios.
The brown-haired man asks if he can speak, and Chica tells him to suit himself.
Chica calls Helios a super rookie and asks if he has really never died once.
A sudden dark hum sounding follows purple energy swirling around a contract held by Chica. Chica introduces himself as part of the Tower Committee, while Helios realizes he is immobilized.
Chica offers family, brotherhood, and support while demanding Helios sign the contract.
The brown-haired master sighs and notes that the worst kind of person has appeared.
The teal-haired master concludes that she has no choice but to take action.
The master warns that coercion is a reportable offense, but Chica insists it is wholesome persuasion. The brown-haired man rejects the nonsensical explanation and firmly declines the offer.
Helios pants heavily while stating he is not looking to join any group yet.
The brown-haired man considers the matter closed and looks away.
Chica laughs nervously and suggests that there must have been some kind of misunderstanding.
Helios stands behind his master while star-shaped sparkles fill the background.
The brown-haired man looks back and asks why the scouts were allowed to approach.
Helios asks if his master will just leave him to handle these approaches alone.
The master confirms his stance while Helios asks if he is actually scared.
A flurry of roses appears as the master tells Helios not to say such things.
Helios blushes deeply and tells his master to be greedy while raising him.
A thought bubble among flowers tells the master not to think of handing him to others. Helios and his master hold hands as a flurry of cherry blossoms surrounds them.
The master stares in silence amidst the beautiful floral backdrop.
Helios grips his master's hand firmly and promises to do whatever he says.
Helios gazes at his master with a soft and determined expression. Helios expresses a desire to cherish this first-time experience. Narration notes the flush on Helios's cheeks and the different look in his eyes.
The master reflects on his past failure to understand the emotions of others.
An older man explains that the feeling is affection forgotten since childhood.
The teal-haired master closes her eyes with a sense of quiet anticipation.
The master remains silent as the scene shifts to a more pensive mood.
Seth and Hyla are exhausted and complain about the persistence of the scouts.
The master suggests that the group should join a suitable family since Helios is targeted by perverts.
Seth shouts in refusal and insists they have nowhere else to go. The master suggests they interact with similar ability users instead of following him.
Seth looks up with tearful eyes and asks if that is truly the case.
Seth decides to trust the recommendation while Helios watches from a distance.
The brown-haired man watches as his companions hide behind his back.
Helios looks away with a serious and conflicted gaze.
Helios shouts his refusal while the master calmly accepts it. A young girl recalls the leaflet guy they encountered earlier in the day.
The brown-haired man rubs his ear with a thoughtful expression. The master predicts that the prison atmosphere will remain chaotic due to guard changes.
Hayla mentions that someone is returning as the group continues their conversation. The teal-haired woman mentions the chief warden. A man's back is shown as the chief warden's return is announced.
A thorny branch looms over the word fu.
The prison warden is noted to have returned.
The brown-haired man realizes the warden was outside the whole time. The brown-haired man considers laying low while observing Helios handle several scouts.
The brown-haired man asks if Helios is done and if he has any other comments.
The brown-haired man suggests aiming for vitals next time, and Helios agrees.
Hyla questions the brown-haired man's sudden lack of praise.
The brown-haired man dismisses the fight as nothing special while Hyla looks on. Hyla assumes the fight was an obvious victory. Hyla notes the opponents weren't worth touching, while the master considers how he handles strong foes. Hyla calls the brown-haired man an enigma, much to his confusion.
Hyla notes the relationship feels less one-sided, though the master finds it nonsensical.
Hyla whispers an offer to show him something fun.
A castle setting is introduced as the start of a story.
A boot steps through the grass as a princess is mentioned.
The brown-haired man manifests as Prince Mint within the Snow White story. Helios notes that he was the target of this floor's trial.
The master realizes he has become a storybook prince as the background shifts.
The teal-haired master explains that the floor manifested her dislike for fairy tales instead of her fears.
The brown-haired man points toward the castle as their first destination. Seth appears as a crying gatekeeper in full armor and begs for help. A sudden, bright flash sounding follows the master touching Seth, allowing the knight to move.
Seth blushes with joy after being freed from his paralysis.
Seth reports that a queen sent a telepathic message from inside the castle. The master considers that the role of queen might actually suit the woman. Hyla appears as a blushing face within the queen's magic mirror.
Seth laughs at the situation while the mirror-bound Hyla demands to be released.
The group discusses the surprisingly cozy atmosphere of the area. The master explains he simply dislikes the setting, suggesting the floor might be glitching. Brett the hunter and Gade the dwarf exchange boisterous greetings and insults.
Hyla praises Brett's instinctive hunting while he laughs off the achievement. The brown-haired man looks around and asks for Helios's whereabouts.
Gade begins to explain where Helios has gone. Gade explains that Helios was separated from the group as the story progressed.
The master orders everyone to stay put while he goes to fetch Helios from beyond a barrier.
Gade shouts in surprise as the master moves forward.
A sudden, sharp zoom sounding follows the master walking toward the forbidden area.
The brown-haired man lets out a soft exclamation of surprise.
A glass coffin filled with white flowers sits under the shade of a tree. The master approaches the coffin and asks what the occupant is doing where.
The brown-haired man stares in shock at the sight before him.
Helios lies blushing inside the coffin as the master reacts with amazement. Helios tells his master to shut up after being teased about his new dress. The master laughs at the situation while Helios asks about the rest of the team.
The master teases Helios about the dress while Helios pleads for him to stop.
Helios tells the brown-haired master he won't let it slide if he leaves.
Helios shouts at his master to stop laughing and take action. A sudden glowing spark sounding follows the master agreeing to leave. The chibi master wonders about the bizarre sequence of events.
The master considers if he must follow the script of the story.
Helios looks toward the horizon with a serious gaze. Helios insists that the master should just finish the task. The master states that they are required to kiss. The master mentions Hyla while finding the situation with a man awkward. Helios blushes and demands that his master be the one to do it. Helios explains that his current feelings are different from before. Helios blushes deeply as he looks up at his master. Helios claims that he does not have any prejudices. The brown-haired master reluctantly yields and agrees to the kiss. Helios blushes and urges the master to hurry up.
The chibi master asks if it is his first time.
A brown-haired man in royal attire claims the other is his first. The brown-haired man leans over Helios amidst a floral background. The two men lean in close as if about to share a kiss. The master leans in and kisses Helios amidst falling flowers. The master pulls back and notes that a simple touch is insufficient. A sudden, sharp snap sounding follows the master reaching for Helios's hair. The two men share a deep kiss surrounded by sparkles. A sudden, soft gasp sounding follows the pair in a close embrace. The teal-haired master leans in for a kiss with Helios.
Their eyes meet in a brief moment of intimacy.
A sudden, rushing wind sounding follows Helios sitting up as the kiss concludes. The brown-haired master states he no longer cares about Helios's actions. The master and Helios share another kiss in the floral field. Helios looks dazed and blushes intensely after the kiss. The master smiles at the scenery while Helios calls it nonsense. A sudden magical chime sounding follows Helios transforming into a prince. The chibi master calls Helios a baby while Helios reacts angrily. Hyla observes that the barrier on the hill has disappeared. The brown-haired master sighs about the many events that occurred. Helios protests when the master teases him about being bitten by bugs. Hyla and her companion wonder about the lack of a clear ending message.
The master suspects a separate boss and tells the others to be quiet.
A sudden, sharp gasp sounding follows the master sensing an ominous presence. A sudden, loud crackle sounding follows a hooded figure appearing in lightning.
The hooded figure searches for someone she calls baby.
The hooded figure asks for her baby's location while Hyla reacts.
Hyla watches with a concerned and shocked expression.
The hooded woman is identified as the fairy tale's queen.
Hyla asks Helios for instructions while he looks on in worry. The queen looms over the master while asking for her child. The queen looms as a massive, dark silhouette over the group.
The queen demands that they reveal where her baby is.
A sudden, deafening roar sounding follows dark energy erupting from the queen. A companion asks the boss if he successfully blocked the blast. Brett laughs and declares that he is still alive. The teal-haired master mocks the queen's maternal claims. The queen charges at them with a menacing dark aura. The brown-haired master struggles against Gareth's restrictions, determined to see the new boss's face. The master's fist connects with a sudden, heavy thud sounding as he demands to see the new boss.
The master observes the queen's endurance as she desperately calls for her baby.
As the queen stumbles, she continues her frantic search for her child while Helios watches. A sudden, sharp swipe sounding accompanies the queen lunging at Helios and ordering him to follow her.
The master manifests a decorative gun and mocks the queen's twisted maternal claims.
Helios groans in pain as the queen seizes him by the throat with a sudden, tight squeeze sounding. A sudden, soft poof sounding follows a cloud of smoke rising from the red carpet.
The brown-haired master prepares his weapon, carefully aiming at his target. A sudden, deafening bang sounding follows the master firing a powerful shot from his rifle. A sudden, crackling boom sounding follows a beam of light striking the queen, leaving Helios stunned. The master lowers his weapon and coldly dismisses the defeated queen. Helios stares at the ornate gun, bewildered by the master's sudden display of power. Helios asks if his master was hiding his strength, but the man dismisses the notion while holding his favorite weapon. The master praises Helios's impressive skill in creating a spear mid-attack. Helios looks away dejectedly and notes that he still has a long way to go.
The master watches his companion and wonders if he was simply seeking praise. A sudden, gentle rustle sounding follows the master pulling Helios into a surprise hut.
The master pats Helios' shoulder and reaffirms that his previous words were indeed meant as praise.
Helios blushes as the master tells him to simply accept the praise and be proud.
Helios hesitates before asking the master a question. While the group laughs, Hyla wonders if they have forgotten something important. The master recalls a vision where various female silhouettes merged into a single teal-haired woman. Helios stands behind the teal-haired woman and asks if the master is actually a woman.
Helios embraces the master and begs to be shown the truth. The master realizes that the question of his identity was what bothered Helios. Helios hides his face against the master and asks to be believed.
In a quiet study, a black-haired man's hand stops writing with a sudden, sharp scratch sounding.
The black-haired man pauses at his desk, deep in thought.
The black-haired man smiles with a predatory gaze and claims to have found his lady.
The black-haired man gestures for silence as he considers his next move.
A sudden rhythmic tap sounding follows the man asking who is currently in the detention cell. A guard reports the names of the prisoners and notes that Brett is monitoring the target. The black-haired man decides not to have Brett stand by it. The man orders the mission to proceed exactly as planned. He reflects on how the target vanished without a trace, leaving no trail behind.
A sudden metallic rattle sounding follows red chains binding a gloved hand as a signal is sensed.
The black-haired man looks annoyed by the current turn of events. The man imagines himself embracing the teal-haired woman and calling her his strong, capable lady. Back in the prison, the master looks at his hand as a sudden, faint shimmer sounding occurs. The teal-haired master realizes that she has been completely caught. A sudden, sharp click sounding follows the master recalling a mark that appeared while using his gun. The master regrets using his unique Kia, knowing it led to this discovery. He considers the trouble of being caught by that man, but identifies a bigger problem. The master's gaze falls on Helios, who stands nearby.
The master notes that Helios has been acting strangely and avoiding eye contact.
Helios recalls the intimate kiss they shared during the fairy tale trial.
The master assumes Helios is simply angry about being forced to kiss another man. Helios looks up in surprise at the master's interpretation. The master offers to let Helios hit him to release his pent-up frustration instead of avoiding training. The brown-haired man's mention of their kiss makes Helios panic. The master asks if Helios is still upset about the inside.
Helios reacts with a wide-eyed, blushing silence.
A sudden, sharp slap sounding follows Helios covering the man's mouth. The master notes Helios's refusal to maintain eye contact as proof of his anger. Helios blushes deeply and demands that the staring stop immediately. The master reflects on the psychological distance growing between them. The master considers Helios's rigid and exclusionary personality.
He views Helios as a poor match for the harsh prison environment.
The teal-haired woman contemplates closing the gap before the master's arrival. A sudden, heavy stomp sounding follows the master's arrival for a report. The red-haired guard remarks on the recent chaos within the tower. The
The teal-haired woman reflects on the shifting, unusual atmosphere. Training continues as the master makes a disturbing observation. Many prisoners have begun to vanish without explanation. Inmates simply disappear, leaving only empty outlines behind. Terrified prisoners wander before vanishing without a single trace.
A bloodied hand suggests the missing have been eliminated.
The rapid rate of disappearance suggests a ruthless agenda.
The master stands alone, weighing the gravity of the situation. A sudden, soft sigh sounding follows the man dismissing his concerns.
The woman suspects the tower's difficulty is reacting to her presence.
She welcomes the challenge as a means of trading. A sudden, quick scratch sounding follows the guard discussing floor domains. The master mocks the committee members as unhinged individuals. The guard reports chaos at the top of the tower. A sudden, low hum sounding follows the guard mentioning the death toll. The master realizes the report meeting has lasted too long. The brown-haired man heads toward the training grounds. A sudden, rhythmic thud sounding follows Helios striking another inmate. The master intervenes and calls out the brawling group. Hyla and her companion greet the boss with relief. A sudden, sharp gasp sounding follows Brett's nervous reaction. The master senses something strange about the group's behavior. He demands an explanation for the pointless violence. A sudden, heavy stomp sounding follows the master approaching Hyla. Hyla explains that Helios was provoked into the fight. The master finds Helios's lack of restraint entirely predictable. The group pleads for the master not to be disappointed in Helios. The master denies being angry despite the tense atmosphere. Hyla asks the boss to stop pressuring the team. The master realizes his subconscious murderous intent has leaked out. Helios remains committed to following his master's every command. The master questions why Helios ignored his specific orders. Hyla reveals Helios fought to defend the master's odor. The companions confirm their anger was sparked by filthy insults. Hyla offers a sincere apology for the premature fighting. The master reflects on the group's blind, familiar admiration. The teal-haired woman finds their devotion hauntingly reminiscent of the past. She acknowledges that climbers eventually discard their temporary emotions. Helios watches his master and wonders why the man seems so different. Helios looks away and finds his master's shifting behavior annoying. A sudden rhythmic thud sounding follows the master and Helios walking together through the stone courtyard. Helios stands in the sunlight, his face clearly marked with bruises. The master watches silently as Helios walks past him in the garden. The brown-haired man finds the current situation and Helios's reaction quite funny. A sudden, sharp gasp sounding follows Helios flinching as his master leans in close. A sudden, soft hum sounding follows Helios blushing deeply and complaining about the master's childish attitude. Helios insists that he has done nothing wrong despite his master's scrutiny. The master asks Helios directly why he isn't angry about what happened. Helios questions the master's indifference to the world while recalling a past warm embrace. Helios looks down and asks if his master is planning to abandon him. A sudden, sharp grab sounding follows Helios clutching his master's sleeve and accusing him of being petty over his disobedience. The master is completely baffled by the sudden and dramatic talk of abandonment. The master notes that Helios is finally looking him in the eye instead of avoiding him. A sudden, quiet chuckle sounding follows the master deciding that they are finally making progress. The master asks how Helios could possibly conclude that he was being abandoned. Helios stammers and struggles to find a coherent explanation for his fears. The master recalls the specific moment he smiled, realizing it triggered Helios's suspicion. A sudden, soft gasp sounding follows the master asking why Helios has suddenly gone silent. Helios admits in a small voice that he must have completely misunderstood the master's intentions. A sudden, quick wave sounding follows the master's playful and dismissive reaction. A sudden low hum sounding follows the master mockingly asking if his baby was truly scared of being left behind. A sudden, sharp swipe sounding follows Helios covering his face in shame and demanding that the conversation stop. The master pulls Helios's hands away and commands him not to look away. A sudden, light tap sounding follows the master lifting Helios's chin to examine his face. A sudden, soft rub sounding follows the master noting that Helios got badly bruised by weak opponents. The master acknowledges that the recent trials must have been very tough on his companion. A sudden, light touch sounding follows Helios staring intensely at his master in a moment of quiet connection. The master and Helios stand together in the courtyard under the bright afternoon sun. A sudden, quiet gasp sounding follows Helios pointing out that the master is always the one initiating physical contact. Helios blames the master for the misunderstanding, reminding him of a promise to always stay by his side. A sudden, sharp gasp sounding follows Helios flinching in shock at the master's sudden laughter. A sudden, sharp tsk sounding follows the master mockingly apologizing to the kid for his behavior. The teal-haired woman watches the scene from a distance with a pensive and thoughtful expression. A sudden, low hum sounding follows a uniformed guard predicting that a massacre will soon occur within the tower.
The master changes his mind and tells Helios that he no longer has to avoid fighting.
The master reflects on the state of the tower and notes how tiresome it has become. A sudden, sharp snap sounding follows the master preparing to demonstrate a new level of power. The master tells Helios that if he is going to fight, he should do it properly from now on. A sudden, bright flash sounding follows the master manifesting a surge of intense golden energy. The master smiles with a predatory, menacing gaze as his power continues to grow. The master looks at Helios and asks for confirmation of his resolve. A sudden, crackling boom sounding follows Helios being blown back by a sudden wave of energy. Helios reacts with total shock to the master's sudden and overwhelming display of strength. A sudden, metallic hiss sounding follows the master manifesting a long, ornate spear.
Helios quickly manifests his own weapon to block the master's incoming attack.
A sudden, heavy impact sounding follows the master ordering Helios to stop playing word games and focus. A sudden, sharp gasp sounding follows Helios collapsing onto the stone floor in exhaustion. A sudden, heavy thud sounding follows the master pinning Helios down by the throat with a spear. A sudden, rhythmic thud sounding follows the brown-haired man walking away from Helios, who remains on the ground near his scattered weapons. The master continues walking across the courtyard while asking a pointed question about what was already understood. Standing over the white-haired man, the master bluntly states that Helios is completely unsuited for the role of captain, leaving the boy shocked. Helios reacts with visible frustration, demanding to know why he was suddenly attacked just for that observation to be delivered. Helios argues that words alone would have been sufficient, but his master mockingly questions where the entertainment would be in such a simple approach. The brown-haired man smiles broadly while manipulating a swirl of green energy, noting that near-death experiences are the best way to ensure a lesson sticks. Helios looks up with wide purple eyes, breathlessly asking why his mentor chooses such brutal methods of instruction. While Helios clutches his head in despair over his choice in mentors, his master stands behind him with a cheerful and satisfied expression. A discarded spear rests on the stone floor, ignored for the moment as the tension between the two men lingers. The teal-haired woman appears with a small, knowing smile as she reflects on the unfolding situation. A memory of the original Helios shows him as a noble warrior wielding a sword, which narrative notes suggest might lead to smoother progress. The brown-haired man observes Helios's struggle with the spear, privately considering his reasons for not recommending the more traditional weapon. A sudden, low hum sounding follows the spearhead glowing with an intense, crackling white energy as Helios begins to exert himself. A sudden, sharp snap sounding follows the brown-haired man calmly watching the spearhead as it is thrust toward his face. The master focuses intently, his gaze narrowing as he prepares to respond to the incoming attack. A sudden, metallic ring sounding follows Helios bracing his spear and questioning if the master truly believes a sword would be a better fit. The brown-haired man hums thoughtfully as he evaluates Helios' stance and his newfound determination. Helios tightens his grip on the weapon, desperately asking for just one chance to land a single hit on his mentor. A sudden, rhythmic thud sounding follows Helios lunging forward with all his strength to catch his master off guard. A sudden, soft sigh sounding follows the master's smirk as he prepares to effortlessly dodge the incoming strike. A sudden, sharp shing sounding follows the brown-haired man leaping high into the air to evade the spear's tick. A sudden, soft rub sounding follows Helios's shock as he realizes his master has moved with impossible speed. The brown-haired man leans in close to Helios's face, mockingly asking whoever claimed he was restricted to using only one weapon. A sudden, low hum sounding follows the master manifesting a sword and reflecting on his decision to withhold certain weapon recommendations. A sudden, sharp flick sounding follows the brown-haired man using a single hand to deflect Helios' spear with incredible precision. A vision of Helios surrounded by a vast arsenal reveals his innate talent for mastering every weapon rather than being limited to just a sword. A sudden, crackling hum sounding follows the master's hand surging with electricity as he makes contact with the spear's blade. A sudden, metallic clang sounding follows the brown-haired man shattering Helios's weapon with a predatory smile, calling the display a waste. A sudden, sharp snap sounding follows Helios's stunned silence as he watches the shards of his spear fly through the air. A sudden, heavy thud sounding follows the master's feet making contact with the ground as he lands after his display of power. Shards of light fall around the master with a soft tinkle sounding as he looks back at his student with a satisfied grin. Helios collapses forward, his hands on the floor as he gasps for air in total physical and emotional exhaustion. Helios looks up and asks if the master is truly incapable of speaking normally, but the man merely finds the suggestion novel. The brown-haired man explains that for someone who can manifest anything, the greatest danger is becoming predictable by following fixed patterns. A glowing blue bow icon signifies the versatility required of a high-level materialization ability user. The master notes that there is no logical reason to force a naturally versatile fighter to limit their options to a single style. Narrative text suggests that while the male lead would survive on his own, the current path provided by his master is different.
The teal-haired woman reflects on her role in raising the boy and the heavy responsibilities it entails.
Helios stands alone in a field of falling petals, touching his face as he processes the master's harsh but effective lessons.
A sudden, soft gasp sounding follows a chibi Helios looking bewildered while his mentor sparkles with mischievous energy nearby.
Helios remains confused as flowers bloom around him, unsure of what to make of the master's sudden shift in tone. The scene shifts to the 38th floor of the tower, where the brown-haired man reflects on how quickly his perspective has shifted recently.
A sudden, sharp gasp sounding follows Helios frantically agreeing to move forward after the master asks if they are ready to proceed.
A sudden, soft sigh sounding follows a chibi master shrugging his shoulders with an air of complete nonchalance. A magical dartboard determines the fates of the group, landing Seth in a den of addicts while others face their own distinct trials. A sudden, sharp swipe sounding follows a dart striking the back of a distorted Helios as the floor selection is finalized. The narrative confirms that Helios has been chosen for the current trial on the specific floor of the tower. A sudden, low hum sounding follows the master observing a decrepit house crawling with thousands of dark insects. A sudden, quiet chuckle sounding follows the black-haired man laughing at the disgusting sight and wishing for everyone's immediate demise. Thoughts dwell on how someone grew prettier than expected despite their constant and unsettling giggling throughout the trials.
The master proudly praises his disciple's growth.
The orange-haired woman feels the creepy atmosphere. Helios remains silent and deeply unsettled. Visions of insects haunt the white-haired boy. A sudden, sharp snap sounding follows Helios identifying the basement. Helios points toward the boss's location. A sudden, low hum sounding follows Helios directing the globe.
Creepy insect legs loom in the shadows.
Seth celebrates their victory over the swarm.
The master observes the scene with intent. The master dismisses Helios's pale complexion as a malament. Helios is confused by the sudden remark. A sudden, sharp swipe sounding follows the master brandishing insect legs. The master jokes about his new ones. Helios screams for his mentor to stop.
Seth whispers that the master is demonic.
A sudden, soft sounding follows the master's playful taunt. Helios sighs at his master's eccentric behavior. Brett laughs while Helios covering his eyes. Helios realizes the master is playing pranks. The white-haired boy falls into silence. The master questions Helios about his phobia. Brett dismisses the question as a secret. Seth asks the boss for tactical advice.
Helios tells the red-haired man to shub.
Brett shudders at the thought of rugs. The master orders the group to attest. A giant bug approaches from behind. The women panic at the beetle show.
The group rushes toward an escape tuff.
They come to a sun cult. Brett leaps forward to join a fight. A sudden, heavy thud sounding follows Brett's lethal strike. Seth uses his shield to pin legs. The orange-haired woman binds the giant insect. Helios prepares to deliver the final blow. A sudden, metallic ring sounding follows Helios's multiple spear strike. The teal-haired woman notices his newfound skill. A sudden, sharp snap sounding follows a green crystalline strike. Helios moves with incredible high-speed grace. The white-haired boy delivers a powerful strike. A sudden, sharp gasp sounding follows Helios's finishing move. The beetle's armor shatters with a sudden, metallic ring sounding. Helios stands victoriously over the slain monster. The women realize the boss remains ahead.
The master reflects on his squats and prelit.
The master notes Helios's exceptional growth. The teal-haired woman admires the multiple summons. 2 blades rest silently in the dark soil. The teal-haired woman praises Helios's natural talent. The brown-haired master asks for praise, while the white-haired Helios looks back at him with confusion. The master continues by praising Helios for successfully using multiple summons simultaneously instead of relying on just one. A blushing Helios looks down and admits he only performed the feat because he felt capable of doing so. Hyla realizes with shock that Helios copied her technique simply by observing it once, a feat that would make others die of envy. The master watches a figure in the distance, trailing off as he observes their movements. Helios questions if the master ever intends to reveal their current location to the group. He asks how the master knows such a complex basement, and the master reveals that it is actually his home. Narrative text identifies the location as the ducal residence basement as the massive mansion looms at dusk. The master explains the estate's construction history before deciding to end the small talk and continue their journey. Helios pauses to ask if the master intends to ask him any further questions. The brown-haired master looks over his shoulder with a curious and questioning expression.
Helios wonders why his master refuses to ask how he knows this place so well or why he clearly fears it. He continues his questioning, asking if the master feels any curiosity at all regarding other matters concerning him.
The two stand together in the narrow stone corridor, the master looking back at his persistent companion.
The master's bluntness is clear as he states that he is not actually curious at all. Helios reacts with a start, visibly unsettled by the master's complete lack of interest.
Narrative text reflects on the fact that everyone present is a convict, meaning a normal past is almost non-existent.
Hyla observes the two men from the side with a serious and contemplative expression.
Internal thoughts reveal that the master is already aware of the tragic future that nearly became Helios's reality.
A vision of Helios in noble attire appears as the master concludes that he has no need for further questions.
He reminds Helios that he only needs information to escape, stating that guards prioritize orders over idle chit-chat. The master covers a smile, noting to himself that his companion is acting like a child again.
Helios looks away in frustration, telling the master to forget it since he already knows the outcome.
He bitterly reflects on his belief that his teacher cares nothing for his personal life or feelings. The master watches in silence as Helios begins to walk away with his arms crossed.
Helios suddenly steps back and places a firm, possessive hand on the master's shoulder.
He demands that the master refrain from giving anyone else his special attention or focus.
Helios reminds him of a previous promise that he would be the only one treated differently from the others. He continues his demand, insisting that he be the only individual the master singles out.
The master looks back and agrees to honor the request, specifically in his role as a guard.
Helios continues walking, repeating the condition of being a guard with a look of dissatisfaction.
The master remains standing still as Helios disappears further into the dark basement corridor.
He initially thinks Helios has calmed down, but then senses a lingering tension in the air. Helios is shown from behind with a turbulent aura, acknowledging that his internal state is still a mess. A sharp, sudden crack, sounding as a heavy object is slammed down among the spiders. The red-haired man complains about the increasing number of bugs as the dark-haired girl jokes about the environment.
A loud, sudden command for Brett to snap out of his trance echoes as the group continues forward.
Hyla observes the group and notes that Helios appears to be in the worst condition of everyone present.
The red-haired man looks on with deep concern as Helios continues to struggle physically. Helios is shown breathing heavily with sweat dripping down his face as he forces himself to move.
Gripping a spear for support, Helios stumbles forward as the narrative notes his condition is rapidly sliding. The party members note that Helios is so focused he doesn't even realize they are standing right beside him.
A terrifying door decorated with a skeleton looms, and Helios admits he is dangerously weak to this environment.
Helios covers his eyes in distress, suspecting there is another hidden reason for his physical collapse.
Words flash across the screen, indicating a complete and total lack of curiosity. Helios reflects on the master's coldness, realizing he knew exactly what the man would say. The master considers the character of a man who acts stone cold yet harbors a hidden kindness. The dark-haired girl asks if it's true that only the boss is allowed to mess with him. A nostalgic vision of the two men together appears as the master acknowledges that he is treated differently. Helios touches his hair while silently wondering what it is that truly makes him special to his master. Helios stares at two guards through bars. Narrative thoughts ask if he would have acted differently. He clutches his robe while thinking, probably not. The master's indifference to everyone is noted. Helios stops walking in a dark stone hallway.
His stomach flips as he faces the past. Seth shouts about a massive door bed.
Seth asks if Helios knows the floor's contents. Helios explains a boss waits inside a giant hall while the orange-haired woman reacts with disgust.
He wishes he could simply pass on now. Seth gasps at the massive chamber inside the room. They find both a giant centipede and spider. The orange-haired woman asks which one is the boss.
Helios spots a person standing among the monsters.
He identifies the mysterious figure as a dupe.
Master confirms that is the strongest real bass.
Helios understands they must win to clear.
Seth asks Helios for his combat tactical plan. Helios grips his glowing blue spear tightly. He asks the teacher to handle the spider. Master reacts with a confused, questioning hum. Helios explains they cannot manage both creatures alone. He reminds his mentor to keep his words. Helios' body shakes with visible, intense fear. Master notices his student's surprising inner guts. Helios thinks his mentor is being very rude. The brown-haired man finally agrees to help. Young Helios asks if his father summoned him. He runs toward the underground meeting place. The boy hopes for his father's acknowledgement. He wishes to be called by his name. A sudden, soft click sounding follows the door opening.
The Duke waits with a massive centipede.
The child looks on with wide purple eyes.
The Duke reveals his completed research results.
Helios screams as he faces the deadly poison. Helios braces his spear against the poop. Seth and Brett engage the centipede swan.
Master observes his own coat becoming corroded.
He analyzes the beast's unstable and experimental nature.
He decides to end the fight quickly.
A sudden, sharp snap sounding follows the master.
A sudden, piercing screech sounding follows light beams.
He effortlessly restricts the giant monster's movements.
The master delivers a final, bright strike.
He announces his departure with a smile.
A sudden, sharp swipe sounding follows Seth's shouting.
Master observes with a light-hearted, floral energy while Seth tells Brett to snap out of it.
He watches the white-haired boy from afar.
Helios confronts the Duke's dark, tainted power.
A sudden, loud laugh sounding follows the Duke striking down the white-haired boy. The brown-haired man asks the orange-haired woman why she is not assisting the captain.
The man questions if she is free, but the orange-haired woman explains she is occupied using her bewitchment ability.
A sudden, booming laugh sounding follows the Duke as Helios groans in pain while his mentor refuses to intervene.
The orange-haired woman watches the combat with a look of sharp realization.
Hala argues that the master could easily kill the boss, but he notes that helping would involve selfish motives.
The brown-haired man calls Hala smart for her observational skills. Garrett explains that she only wants him to help so she can progress through the tower more easily. The brown-haired man admits he appreciates the woman's shrewd and calculating nature.
Garrett clenches his fist while asking if she believes he is entirely devoid of emotion.
Narrative text recalls how Hyla used her bewitchment ability primarily to scam others in the past.
The orange-haired woman reflects on how she learned to actually fight enemies thanks to her mentor. She notes that every member of their group is currently indebted to the brown-haired man.
Hala expresses her deep worry because the master is protecting Helios so perfectly.
The woman decides they must do their best to help the master achieve his specific goals. A sudden, sharp screech sounding follows the giant insect's death as the group debates the captain's safety.
Hyla emphasizes that she wants the captain to live and believes he feels the same about them. She reminds the brown-haired man that he is already well aware of the captain's true nature.
The woman explains that the captain is out of place here and would be devastated by any death.
Hyla acknowledges their ulterior motives but notes the master's sincere wish for everyone to survive.
She admits the situation is beyond her control and stakes her life on asking for his help.
The orange-haired woman doubts her own words, while the brown-haired man offers a soft smile. Garrett explains that her honesty is exactly why he continues to keep her by his side. The master notes that while perfect sincerity is impossible in their world, their current bond is enough. Narrative text reflects on the nature of the hellish environment they inhabit. A lone castle stands as text suggests that their small connections make life somewhat livable. The brown-haired man suggests that Hyla is severely underestimating Helios' actual capabilities.
Helios stands victoriously over the defeated Duke, proving his master's faith in his growth was justified.
Garrett explains he only allowed the fight to proceed because he knew Helios was strong enough to win.
The white-haired boy stands silently as the weight of his victory sinks in.
Helios turns back to face his mentor after finishing the intense battle.
The white-haired boy blushes while worrying that taking the kill himself might have made his master angry. A system notification confirms floor 38 is cleared while Seth and Brett collapse in total terror.
Hyla kneels and thanks the master, though he acts confused about the reason for her gratitude.
The orange-haired woman expresses her joy at being able to move forward alongside her comrades. The brown-haired man thoughtfully repeats the word comrades to himself. The brown-haired man warns the orange-haired woman and the white-haired boy that lasting bonds are nearly impossible to find. The orange-haired woman looks skeptical, questioning what the man hopes to achieve by casting doubt on their unity. In a playful moment, the brown-haired man suggests he is acting out of maternal instinct, leading the woman to mockingly ask, why not a father's?
The woman points out his apparent lack of belief in traditional loyalty or friendship.
The man concedes her point with a smirk, explaining that such detachment is simply the nature of psychic powers.
A shadowy purple hand looms over a small figure as the man describes how dangerous and alluring these abilities truly are. He tells the orange-haired woman she will soon understand if she survives, noting her talent will make her highly sought after. Leaning in close, the brown-haired man whispers a warning that her potential only matters if she stays with their current group.
Helios hides his face as his mentor asks why he is moping. The mentor approaches the reclining boy, teasing him that sulking makes him look lonely and saddens his teacher.
Helios remains lying down, bluntly stating he has no patience for his mentor's trivial chatter.
With a sudden, firm movement, the brown-haired man pulls the boy's hand away to look him in the eye. A startled purple eye stares back. In a heavy moment of silence, the boy asks if his master has ever been forced to kill his own family. The man gazes down seriously. The mentor tries to lighten the mood by claiming such frightening questions terrify him, though the boy is not amused by the deflection. A mentor pats a sting cud.
Helios irritably knocks the hand away and tells his master to drop the subject entirely.
A man contemplates the meaning of family.
Helios rests as narrative thoughts wonder if the conversation provided any true comfort. The boy asks for clarification on who his master might consider family, but his mentor remains vague.
Helios recalls being forced to play a role in a twisted fairy tale, while questioning if his master truly cared for those he lost.
The brown-haired man admits his own mind is somewhat fractured, making it difficult for him to be certain of his feelings.
Empty and bored after they leave. A blood-stained path of hollow revenge.
The mentor asks if those dark, lingering feelings are close enough to what the boy considers love.
Helios stares as the narrative notes the boy's complexion is beginning to return to normal.
Solace found in a shared butt.
A clumsy connection between two companions.
The brown-haired man offers praise for the iron chain the boy summoned earlier, though Helios suspects he simply copied his teacher.
While the mentor insists his praise is sincere, a chibi Helios dismisses it as cheap flattery.
The boy explains he used a sword because he wanted to emulate the one who originally taught him the blade.
Flustered and blushing, Helios insists that his current mentor is his first true master, despite his earlier training. Resting on the floor, Helios answers his teacher's question by stating he is far from satisfied with his current progress. He dismisses the defeated boss as a poor imitation that failed to match the strength of the real enemy.
Helios clenches his fist and swears he will escape this place to finally exact his revenge on his true target.
The brown-haired man notes that he rarely feels strong emotions or preferences for anything in life. As they sit beneath the arched windows of the hall, the boy asks why his mentor is suddenly becoming so personal. Narrative text reveals that despite his usual indifference, the man found the boy's combat performance truly impressive. Sitting together in the fading light,
A man smiles with genuine warmth. The master openly admits he likes the boy's fierce determination, leaving Helios completely stunned. Startled purple eyes show deep shock. Helios is startled by his master's sudden and uncharacteristic display of casual physical contact. A chibi Helios scolds his mentor for speaking so casually while the master wonders why he is angry.
Two hands are shown clasped tightly together in a moment of unexpected intimacy.
The brown-haired man asks if Helios is trying to say he likes him, causing the boy to blush furiously. Helios frantically challenges his master to a duel while the man compares his yapping to a small puppy. Helios stares at his mentor with wide purple eyes and a face flushed with deep emotion. The white-haired boy looks away and awkwardly asks about the nature of love.
The teal-haired woman is confused by the sudden change in topic while Helios loudly denies everything.
A flustered Helios asks if his master has any affection for him, equating the feeling to love.
the master casually confirms his affection with a blunt admission of love, leaving Helios completely stunned.
Helios covers his burning face with his hand, unable to process the master's directness.
The boy remains in a state of total shock, hiding his expression from everyone present. The brown-haired man watches his disciple with a calm, steady gaze and begins to speak. Helios looks up with a serious yet flustered expression as he waits for his mentor to finish his thought. Harsh light falls on the Pethoners. Sunset sky glows with deep red. Golden light reflects off shimmering water. A spider web hangs in a cell.
Helios lies awake, poor duck.
Helios lies awake next to the sleeping mentor, thinking about how absurd it is to share a bed with him. Narrative thoughts describe the irony of falling into a deep sleep the moment he is near the person he likes. The boy struggles to sleep. Helios reflects on how the boss they defeated earlier today was eerily similar to his father, from the smiling mouth to the placement of the wrinkles. A dark command echoes through time. In a traumatic memory, a young Helios begs his father to explain what will happen if he does not destroy his target, only to be coldly questioned in return.
The father looms over the boy, warning him that he too must become like the monstrous spiders surrounding them.
A gentle touch breaks the memory. Within the cold stone walls, the boy laments his perceived weakness and wonders how much longer he must endure these relentless nightmares. The master notices the boy's distress and asks if he is unable to sleep. Helios is startled to find his master lying beside him, and the man repeats his question about the boy's insomnia. The boy tries to dismiss his worries by claiming they have nothing to do with his teacher, but the master questions how that could possibly be true. Helios suddenly sits up and yells, demanding to know who his master is calling a cutie. Lying comfortably on his side, the brown-haired man notes with a smile that the boy looks more normal when he is angry. The master asks once more why the boy is unable to sleep.
Helios looks away and speaks softly.
Clenching the blanket tightly, Helios asks his mentor if he has ever experienced a sleepless night. The master stares back in disbelief. A subtle, knowing smile forms. The master admits that such nights were rare for him because he was always too occupied with the basic struggle for survival.
Helios asks if he is being told not to complain about luxuries, but the master laughs and tells him not to twist his words, noting that being a teenager doesn't grant him total freedom of speech.
While Helios remains troubled, the master observes his unstable energy and wonders if he should push the boy a bit further.
Helios stares blankly into the distance. The master asks if the 38th floor was too shocking, prompting an irritable denial from Helios, while the boy secretly struggles with his pride and a reluctance to speak openly. Helios reflects that while it is one thing for his master to guess his thoughts, it is quite another to reveal his inner depths with his own voice.
The master reaches out to him. The brown-haired man places his hand over the boy's eyes to help him focus.
The master commands the boy to try to recall a specific memory. Narrative text describes the nightmares, illusions, and the beings that have long ruled over and dragged down the boy's life. The image of his smiling father looms in his mind as a symbol of the things that held him back. The master notes that the boy has recalled his trauma and instructs him to find a memory powerful enough to defeat those lingering nightmares and illusions. Helios feels himself sinking into water. The boy describes the fear crashing over him like a tidal wave and doubts if a memory strong enough to overcome this vast ocean even exists. He gazes upward through the water. A bright vision of closeness appears. An intimate moment flickers in memory. Falling flower petals filled a vision. Back in the prison cell, the boy's trembling finally stops as he holds his face. The master realizes the boy has found a memory and asks him to share what it was.
Helios is left stunned and blushin'.
A chibi version of the master wonders why the boy is staring so blankly and briefly considers knocking him out to end the annoyance.
Helios clenches his fist and whispers the word kissing, leading the master to jokingly ask if he meant a fist to the head. Looking away with a flushed face, Helios clarifies that he was thinking about kissing lips. The boy is overcome with embarrassment. Helios frantically backtracks and calls his own words insane nonsense, shouting that he doesn't know what he is saying. The master looks at him calmly and says that fulfilling such a request is not very difficult. In a sudden, tender move, the brown-haired man leans in and kisses his disciple. A soft kiss sounding fills the air. The master pulls back slightly and asks if the boy thinks he can finally fall asleep now. A close look at their proximity. Helios covers his mouth in total shock while the master confirms that he can indeed sleep now. Surrounded by blooming flowers, the two share a quiet, intimate moment of connection. Helios questions why he feels so different whenever he is around his master. The boy reflects on how he always seems to reveal his weakest side to this man. A rhythmic heartbeat sounding accompanies the white-haired boy's deep, embarrassed blush. He worries about how his teacher truly perceives his vulnerabilities. Helios softly calls out to his mentor in a moment of emotional uncertainty. A gentle touch sounding as the master pulls the boy into a warm embrace. The brown-haired man asks for the boy's real name and true form while holding him close. A beautiful teal-haired woman with glowing pink eyes smiles mysteriously in a sudden vision. Helios rests with his eyes closed, finding a brief respite from his inner turmoil. A deep yawn sounding as morning light breaks over the fortress and the master wakes up. The master asks why the boy is up so early as Helios hides his face in a wave of shame. The master highlights the importance of a good night's sleep to a deeply flustered Helios. Helios reflects that he does not actually dislike the intimate attention his teacher provides. A chibi master mockingly offers to knock the boy out if he continues to struggle with insomnia. Touching his lips, the boy realizes that the closeness he experienced was far from bad. The master informs Seth and the others they will take their time preparing for the 39th floor. Brett whispers about Ged's past behavior while the master reveals he can hear every word. Helios questions if the difficulty of the tower significantly increases starting from the 39th floor. A quick clap sounding as the master mockingly praises the boy's intelligence. The master explains that clearing the 40th floor will promote them to intermediate-level prisoners. A graphic illustrates the massive power gap between levels and the ordeal awaiting them on the 40th floor. A sharp whoosh sounding as an arrow targets Ged for the next ordeal. Ged panics after being targeted for the third time while his companions tease him for his popularity. Ged's body begins to dissolve into glowing energy as his trial begins. A bright flash sounding confirms that Ged has been transported to his personal ordeal. The master reassures a worried Seth that Ged is neither dead nor injured. The brown-haired man looks out with indifference toward the next stage of their journey. A loud boom sounding introduces the chaotic battlefield they have been transported into. Narrative text reveals Ged was a high-ranking officer framed for a crime as Seth reacts in disbelief. Explosions rock the landscape as Helios observes the widespread fighting and Ged's absence. Helios and Brett realize they are completely out in the open on a dangerous battlefield. The master points toward a set of distant ruins to take cover from the crossfire. A light rustle sounding from the bushes alerts Helios to a hidden presence.
Seth shouts a warning as a small figure suddenly dashes toward them.
A small red-haired child suddenly appears and clings tightly to a startled Seth.
The master expresses shock at finding a young child in the middle of a war zone. Helios suggests the child might be a manifestation of Ged's hidden memories or fears.
Brett admits he almost attacked the child out of survival instinct.
A spear tip gleams as it hovers near the silent red-haired boy.
A burst of energy sounding as a powerful aura surrounds the mysterious child. Seth and Helios realize with shock that the young boy is actually a powerful Kia user. Brett gazes coldly as he observes the child's reaction to their presence.
A sharp bang sounding as more explosions occur nearby, intensifying the danger.
Seth and Helios debate the risk of taking an unknown child through a battlefield. Brett mockingly dismisses Seth's compassion as a fake and unnecessary act for prisoners.
The teal-haired woman reflects on how the group's unity is beginning to fall apart.
Tension rises as the companions argue loudly about their next course of action.
Helios intervenes and firmly decides that they will be taking the child with them. The boy explains he is doing this for Seth's peace of mind despite his own lack of trust.
Brett finally concedes to the plan with a look of resignation and annoyance.
Brett follows his leader's decision.
Seth prepares to move out.
Narrative text explains that they learned they were in the territory of a kingdom at war with the Empire, while soldiers shout orders to capture the enemies.
Narrative text reveals that the enemy soldiers immediately charged after seeing the child they called the hummingbird. Narrative text describes the horrific method of using refugee children as psychic information delivery devices to transmit military intelligence.
Hyla expresses her disgust at the mute children being used as tools, while Helios notes that exposing the secret would ruin the Empire's public image. Brett searches the wasteland as a light clack sounding echoes through the room.
Hyla observes that Seth seems used to caring for children.
Seth sadly recalls her younger sibling who died during the war.
Hyla finds the child's face strangely familiar.
Seth asks if Hyla knows the boy.
A sudden, sharp crack sounding as an axe blade pierces the door.
Helios is startled by the sudden axe attack.
Helios and Brett prepare for a fight while the master calmly warns that the door is about to break.
Narrative text introduces the final floor's theme of fear as a heavy smash sounding destroys the door. Seth reacts in shock as G'day appears in the doorway.
The teal-haired woman watches as the ordeal demands a lethal resolution.
Helios questions Gade about his Imperial Army uniform and insignia. Seth calls out to her brother in disbelief.
Gade swings his weapon with a loud clang sounding as Helios checks on Seth. The orange-haired woman confirms she blocked the attack and wonders if this is Gade from the past.
The master disagrees with Hyla's assessment.
The master identifies the soldier as the real Gade.
The child suddenly escapes with a quick patter sounding.
Seth yells for the child to stay back from the dangerous soldier.
Gade drops to the ground with a dull thud sounding and calls for Sanny.
Helios is confused by Gade's reaction.
Gade embraces his son while the group watches in shock.
Hyla realizes they can use the boy to get through to Gade. Brett pulls Hyla back from the Charjulas.
Brett notes that G'day is no longer in his right mind.
Holding his son tightly, Gade draws his sword and furiously threatens to kill anyone who dares to touch the child.
The group realizes that Gade is truly the boss of this war.
Helios catches his breath with a heavy pant sounding. Hyla notes that G'day is scarier than usual and resistant to illusions. Helios notes that Ganade is fighting everyone at once, even while holding the child, and he struggles with the idea of being forced to kill a comrade.
The master observes the battle in silence. Helios asks the master if some trials have no solution.
The master smiles and insists that every trial can be solved.
Voices from the past argue about the necessity of killing a comrade.
The master explains that the goal is to make the prisoners suffer intensely.
Helios considers the master's dark explanation.
The master claims that prisoners give up when they lose hope.
The master warns that the group is reaching its limit while Brett and Hyla desperately coordinate their defense against the relentless soldier.
Narrative text describes the deep despair intended to break the prisoners. As Gade clutches his son, Brett considers the horrific possibility of killing the child to resolve the conflict.
Brett suggests that targeting the child means they don't have to kill G'day.
Seth frantically begs Brett to reconsider as she grabs his arm.
Brett harshly questions if Seth would rather kill their comrade Gade instead of a child they just met, telling her not to be stupid.
Hyla urges a quick decision and tells Brett to stop pressuring Seth before she collapses from the overwhelming strain. A beautiful teal-haired woman with glowing pink eyes looks on as narrative text questions the upcoming decision Hyla must make.
Seth urges the master to make the choice, insisting that the others will be forced to follow his lead.
Helios looks on in silent contemplation as the group waits for a resolution. The teal-haired woman observes the group, questioning the master's motives and noting his tendency to help only when it amuses him. She admits her disdain for the tower's rigid rules and predetermined outcomes while reflecting on the master's unconventional methods.
Helios insists that there is more than one way to solve the trial, challenging the idea of a fixed answer.
The silver-haired boy encourages Hyla to destroy the existing problem and forge a new solution through her own power.
Gareth asks Hyla if she has enough strength left to push her abilities to their limit.
Coughing from exhaustion, Hyla demands that Gareth explain his plan properly before she commits any more energy. Gareth informs Hyla that the goal is to bring G'day back to his senses, leaving her visibly shocked by the request.
The master explains that G'day is trapped by a mental affliction and that only Hyla has the power to break it, despite her current weakened state.
Helios supports Gareth's plan, telling the group that it is the only viable path forward. The silver-haired boy observes that Hyla has been hesitating because she wants to ensure everyone's survival. Brett and Seth enthusiastically offer their help, with Brett admitting he finds the risky plan quite interesting.
Hyla resignedly agrees to the plan, admitting she has no other choice but to trust her companions.
A chibi Helios mockingly calls the plan trial and error, while a chibi Hyla finds his lack of concern far from comforting.
Resigned to her fate, Hyla decides to proceed, noting that they can simply return if they fail and die.
A gentle touch sounding as Gareth places his hand on Hyla's shoulder to steady her.
Gareth tells Hyla to close her eyes while reflecting on the lack of respect his companions show him.
Hyla looks back at the master and questions why he has chosen to assist her at this specific moment.
Gareth smiles and suggests that his help is a reward for her hard work throughout the tower.
The master urges Hyla to close her eyes so they can begin the difficult mental task.
Gareth activates his power, acknowledging that overcoming the tower's mental illusions will be an arduous challenge. Narrative text reveals that understanding G'day's heart is the key to releasing the mental trap surrounding him.
Gareth explains that empathy is essential for mental abilities, regardless of what the tower system dictates.
A soft schwa sounding as Gareth and Hyla synchronize their energy to bridge the mental gap. Gareth directs Hyla to look deep into G'day's subconscious to find the source of his trauma. Gade clutches Sammy tightly while a purple aura swirls around them.
Hyla questions Gade's name as she and Helios watch from the shadows.
Tearfully begging for mercy, Gade explains that his son was conscripted after awakening Akia. G'day reveals his son became a hummingbird, prompting his superior to call it outrageous.
G'day denies being dissatisfied with the military, but begs to save his son from a place of certain death. Distressed and sweating, Gade identifies the location as a designated bombing theme.
The dark-haired superior denies G'day's request, claiming his abilities are essential for the operation.
The superior questions if G'day would abandon hundreds of unit members to go alone.
Gade's fists tremble as he reluctantly accepts his duty to the military.
Narrative text confirms the operation was successful as a judge prepares to deliver G'day Satan's verdict.
Gade is falsely accused of embezzlement and violating prisoner regulations to cover for his superior. Sentenced to 30 years in prison, G'day is described as a soldier who sacrificed his son.
Reflecting on the meaning of loyalty, G'day realizes he would have rather run to save his son.
Hyla and Helios watch as G'day collapses, weeping and calling out for Sammy.
Helios asks what he should do, and Hyla tells him to talk to Gade about his needs.
Hyla reflects on how G'day surprisingly managed to survive prison by always grinning.
Hyla commands G'day to snap out of it while looking at him with determination.
Hyla bluntly tells Gade he cannot go back and the child he held was not his real son.
Hyla quickly stops herself, realizing that the harsh truth is not what G'day needs right now. Hyla changes her approach, offering to help G'day get his revenge.
Identifying herself as a con artist who fooled a kingdom, Hyla promises to help Gallade against any opponent.
Hyla exerts her mental power to snap G'day out of a state.
The teal-haired woman smiles, noting that Hyla's offer is a great one.
A heavy, sudden gasp sounding as Hyla coughs and returns to reality. Hyla wonders if she is truly back after her mental ordeal.
Hyla immediately looks back toward G'day to see the result of her actions.
Gade embraces Sammy in a field as Gareth and Helios observe from behind.
Laughing with relief, Gareth notes it was a close call and mentions that Seth fainted earlier.
Helios looks on with a stoic expression, his purple eyes glowing. Gade tells Sammy they will definitely meet again someday as they share a final embrace.
Sammy smiles warmly as he looks up at his mother.
Gade smiles peacefully, finally at rest with his memories.
Gareth and Hyla watch the scene with mixed emotions. Helios watches in silence as his teacher guides Hyla through the delicate process.
A system notification announces that the 39th floor ordeal has been successfully completed.
A stone door swings open as Seth breathes a sigh of relief that the trial is finally over.
Leaning on Gareth, a tired Helios asks why the master didn't just resolve the situation himself.
Hyla questions Gareth about his own ability to use mental type Kia.
Gareth evasively claims his knowledge is limited, while Hyla senses he is hiding his true capabilities. Hyla asks point blank if Gareth could have saved G'day on his own without her intervention.
Gareth explains that he lacks the empathy required to use such abilities effectively.
The master admits that his mind is too broken to understand the emotional connections needed for mental Kia.
The mysterious woman watches the group from afar, her eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and caution.
Gareth reflects on the horrific nature of forcefully manipulating someone's mind without their consent. Hugging Helios, Gareth admits that it is better for everyone if he cannot use mental-type abilities.
Gareth's eyes reflect a deep hidden sadness as he considers his own nature. The master tells Helios that he is glad he can't use such intrusive powers on him. Hyla calls out to the group while Gareth realizes that Helios is trying to avoid an uncomfortable conversation.
Seth and Brett wave happily, thanking Gareth for his leadership and pulling him toward the group celebration.
Brett runs off excitedly toward the next floor while Gareth watches his companions with a quiet gaze. The teal-haired woman predicts that the group will grow closer, but she remains worried about the dangers of the 41st floor.
A dark-clothed official suddenly appears and calls out to Gareth.
The man asks if he is speaking to guard Gareth, surprising the master with his official tone.
Gareth admits his identity and is ordered to follow the official quietly into the shadows.
The guard informs Gareth that the warden chairman is requesting his presence immediately.
Gareth realizes that he has been caught and reflects on the dire nature of his situation.
A guard informs a dark-haired youth that the chief guard is waiting for him. The youth questions why he is being summoned at this time. The youth thinks it is a bad habit to play along and let himself get hit.
Seeing Helios, a quick tap Samming. Helios pauses, appearing slightly exhausted.
Narrative text identifies Niflheim and names Warden Ralph as the prison's master.
Narrative text explains that the closed nature of the prison gives the guards unimaginable power, noting the chief guard's considerable influence. Narration reveals the guards are split into opposing factions following either the warden or the chief guard.
The youth follows a guard while reflecting on the different characteristics of the two split factions.
Narration describes the warden's guards as generally laid back with a loose chain of command.
Narrative text contrasts the chief guard's side as extremely strict and disciplined, though the youth thinks it is obvious that they are lunatics.
Standing before a door, a voice announces they have arrived.
A thudding click sounding as the youth is told to go on in.
Sweating nervously, the youth thinks about how much he doesn't want to see this person.
A grand, shimmering chandelier hangs above.
Bowing low, the youth thinks the room is luxurious, but notes an overpowering stench of blood.
A calm voice commands him to raise his head.
The youth looks up toward the shelves. Narrative text describes a man with a pale, gloomy impression and snake-like features. Narration identifies the man as the novel's villain, named Hades. Bowing again, the youth is greeted by Hades, who says it is a pleasure to meet him. Hades introduces himself as Hades Paylord, the prison's operations manager and chief guard, noting that this is their first meeting. Narrative text remarks on Hades' chilling presence and eloquent aristocratic speech, revealing his true identity as the Empire's second prince. Narrative text explains that Hades was exiled early from the succession race and is a villain who clashes fiercely with Helios.
Hades mentions he heard a new guard joined while he was away.
Hades claims his duty is to look after every guard's well-being, but the Chibi youth suspects he is just looking for a new slave.
The teal-haired woman reflects on the last proper conversation she had with him after reaching adulthood.
Hades calls the teal-haired woman young lady, catching her off guard.
Hades observes that she possesses an interesting ability, while she wonders what kind of crazy guard calls a prisoner young lady.
Hades laughs and says someone worthy of such treatment deserves it.
Leaning in, Hades admits he calls her that because he covets her.
She looks back with wide eyes, questioning if he means her ability.
Hades says what's important is that he wants to have it, as narrative text reveals he put her in chains that day. Chained and alone, narrative text explains he used them to know her whereabouts at all times.
Still bowing, the youth thinks he shouldn't have gotten involved with such a lunatic from the start.
Hades says he heard the youth caused an interesting incident. Leaning over the desk, Hades says it's a shame he was away when it happened.
A voice questions being treated as a criminal just for killing a few bugs. The youth stands before a tall man in the library, thinking about the lack of value for life. The tall man asks if he feels wronged, but the youth claims he deserved his punishment. The man laments the tragedy of the Vincent barony and says he would have prevented the punishment.
A close-up reveals the youth's striking green eyes as he listens. The tall man notes that the serial killer who killed the entire family has never been found.
A narrative box identifies the name Gareth Finson.
Narrative text reveals that this is the full name of the identity the youth has borrowed.
The teal-haired woman reflects on being framed as a serial killer and now imitating a victim's family member. The tall man suggests the youth has suffered, but the youth denies it. The man pulls the dark-haired youth into a firm hug.
The youth remains silent and still while being embraced.
The man apologizes for his habit as the youth looks on with a blank expression. The tall man suggests they introduce themselves properly.
The green-eyed youth watches as the man reaches out toward him. The green-eyed youth watches closely. Reaching out, Hades says he had a hunch. Shaking hands, the youth thinks Hades hasn't realized he is actually meant. He wears a small, confident grin. Butterflies flutter amidst a purple haze. Narrative text. Hades holds the teal-haired woman's chin while narration describes the ability as a leash used to pinpoint her location and spy on her. Hades looks on as narration explains the simple reason why the youth hasn't been caught after taking Gareth's place. The youth listens with intense focus. The youth thinks he is stronger than the Fico. Narrative text compares the two, stating that if Helios is the strongest water type, then this child is the strongest psychic type. Narrative text reveals she can use every psychic ability, primarily mind reading and brainwashing. Narration adds that she can induce control, suggestion, confusion, and madness. Hades maintains a smooth, practiced smile. As red energy sparks between them, the youth groans, while Hades tells him to bear it a little longer, prompting the youth to realize Hades is attempting to read his memories. Sweat beads on Gareth's face as he prepares for the mental intrusion. He meticulously constructs a fake memory to shield his true identity. A confident smirk plays on his lips as he mocks his opponent's arrogance. He recalls the humiliation of being mentally shackled in the past. His true self observes the mental battlefield with a cold gaze. He anticipates the man's twisted pleasure in catching a supposed criminal. Gareth thinks about how he intentionally planted the false evidence. Hades finds the youth's mental defenses surprisingly difficult to breach. He mistakes Gareth's silence for a moral objection to mind reading. He believes Gareth's unique abilities have unnaturally halted his agent. A sharp, pained gasp sounding as Gareth buckles under the mental strain. Crushing his own power to hide it proves agonizingly difficult for Gareth. He knows there is one vital detail the man has overlooked. Raw, overwhelming talent proves far more effective than years of experience. Hades watches Gareth's physical collapse with a disinterested, cold expression. He concludes that the memories he viewed were completely authentic. He previously suspected the youth was an imposter in disguise. The lack of mental manipulation convinces him the identity is real. He remains certain that no one can surpass his psychic leash. Despite the suspicious timing, he clears the boy of any wrongdoing. The sudden appearance of a strong guard still remains highly questionable. A firm, gloved hand meets Gareth's as the meeting concludes. He wonders if this perfect timing is actually a clever trap. Hades decides the youth standing before him is not his target. A sudden, harsh coughing fit sounding as Gareth falls to the floor. Gareth resents the man's fake concern after the mental assault. Hades remains aloof and deeply skeptical despite the lack of evidence. He is convinced his target is hiding somewhere within the prison. He assumes her objective is the highly restricted prisoner record hall. The central tower looms as a likely hideout for the intruder. The building's massive power signature makes internal surveillance nearly impossible. He turns a final piercing look toward the exhausted youth. Gareth stays hunched over, avoiding eye contact with the chief guard. Hades considers how to use this spent pawn for his goals. Gareth realizes he has not fully escaped the man's suspicion. He knows he must continue enduring these grueling trials alone. He decides to turn the tables and use Hades as training. The orange-haired woman is baffled by Gareth's strange request. Gareth insists she attempt to break her own psychic binding. He offers an enthusiastic thumbs up to encourage her difficult efforts. A strained, heavy gasp sounding as she struggles with the task. He explains that frequent use will eventually increase her power levels. Gareth remains cheerful despite the woman's obvious physical and mental exhaustion. He asks her if she is finally finished for the day. She remains highly skeptical of his sudden burst of optimism. The imposing prison walls stand tall under the bright full moon. Helios waits in the shadows with a serious and brooding expression. Gareth takes a seat on the bench next to his companion. A sudden, sharp tsk sounding as Helios reacts to Gareth's teasing. Helios indignantly denies any romantic implications regarding their late-night meeting. Two chibi figures sit together on a bench, while the brown-haired boy suggests a single wildflower is plenty for a romantic confession, but the silver-haired boy insists it requires at least 100 roses. The brown-haired boy asks Helios if he's lonely because he trained under Hyla and is having a tantrum. The silver-haired man stays silent with a simple affirmative. A sudden, curious sounding as the brown-haired boy notices the silver-haired man's unusual behavior. A louder, confused sounding as the silver-haired man slumps over, surrounded by a gloomy blue aura. Helios snaps at his companion for giving such a brief, casual response to his deep confession. Helios hides his face in his hands, despairing over their lack of communication, while the brown-haired boy watches from the bench. The brown-haired boy tells Helios they aren't children in war. The brown-haired boy reaches out to pat the silver-haired man's head, teasingly asking who treats whom like a child as Helios blushes.
Helios tells his master he has something important to tell him. Helios reveals he has gained a new ability while the brown-haired boy listens attentively.
The teal-haired woman reflects on the fact that Helios's physical skills shouldn't grant anything else.
Helios decides it is time to reveal his secret to his master.
The brown-haired boy reflects on seeing a silhouette behind Helios that likely represents his true form.
The boy continues patting Helios's head.
The brown-haired boy uses his new mind's eye ability to observe his surroundings with glowing yellow eyes.
A soft glowing aha sounding as the boy identifies a faint spark of energy within the silver-haired man's silhouette.
Looking down at Helios, the brown-haired boy realizes the man doesn't know how to use or even identify his own latent power.
Helios nervously fiddles with his fingers, deciding to just watch for now.
The brown-haired boy asks if it is true that Helios will be away tomorrow. The brown-haired boy learns Helios will be away on guard duty for a day or so.
The brown-haired boy warns Helios that he might actually face him.
Helios explains that his upcoming absence is a punishment from a superior, making him a scapegoat.
The brown-haired boy is shocked that a rookie guard is being punished for no reason.
A sharp, sudden hey sounding as Helios becomes shrouded in a cyan energy, shocking the brown-haired boy. A quick, light tap sounding as the brown-haired boy reaches out to catch the collapsing silver-haired man.
The brown-haired boy tells Helios to calm down and insist his body will be fine.
A soft, tender shh sounding as Helios cradles his master, calling the boy's body precious and expressing how much he means to him.
A quick, light blink sounding as the brown-haired boy looks up with wide, stunned eyes.
The brown-haired boy feels his body growing heavy and tells Helios not to be surprised if he collapses.
A soft, heavy thud sounding as the boy slumps into Helios's chest and falls unconscious.
The boy drifts into deep sleep.
Helios cradles the unconscious boy protectively.
Helios looks down with a solemn expression, thinking it wouldn't be strange if the boy suddenly vanished.
A firm, tight grip sounding as Helios clutches his master's shirt, resolving to find his place once he leaves the prison and gets stronger.
Helios envisions a future where he can meet the boy proudly as an equal, dressed in regal attire.
Helios remains in the present, determined to share in the boy's nightmares for now.
Helios holds the sleeping boy close against a backdrop of blue flowers.
A soft, heavy ha sounding as the teal-haired woman notes that things are proceeding as she expected.
The teal-haired woman reflects on her childhood and how she remains small until a sudden growth spurt at 17. The teal-haired woman looks toward a prison tower and identifies the setting as the 70th floor when she was around 14. A sudden, cheerful ha-ha sounding as a new figure notices someone is running late. A tall woman with long silver hair and a facial scar greets the teal-haired girl, calling her kiddo. The scar-faced woman stands over the young teal-haired girl, who notes that her past actions are being repeated exactly. The silver-haired woman asks what else she should call the girl if not you. The teal-haired girl angrily yells for the woman to shut up, while the woman jokingly suggests calling her mama instead. The silver-haired woman uses a psychic leash to lift the teal-haired girl into the air, teasingly remarking on her wasteful language. Dangling upside down, the teal-haired girl calls for a guard, questioning the presence of a prisoner from another block. The Scarface woman laughs and claims she can go anywhere because she is the king, while the girl swears to get revenge. A soft, quick wiggle sounding as the upside-down girl realizes she can move again after the woman offers to let her down for a mama. The teal-haired girl requests to be released while the silver-haired woman with the facial scar questions if she is finally behaving.
A quick, clear ahem sounding as the silver-haired woman gets the girl's attention.
The teal-haired girl stands alone.
The silver-haired woman identifies the girl as an outsider and demands to know her identity. The woman wonders if the girl is brainwashed, but the teal-haired girl questions how her eyes could possibly look manipulated.
The woman demands her true identity. A white shoe steps forward. Golden energy surrounds the woman.
Thinking she might have to sacrifice an arm to land a real hit, the teal-haired girl prepares for a desperate physical struggle.
She looks up with confusion.
Helios steps in to protect her. The teal-haired girl recognizes the newcomer as Helios while he looks back with a stunned expression.
Helios asks the girl how she could possibly know his name. She wonders why he is here. Narration reveals they are trapped in a past nightmare illusion created by Hades' mental art called Kia.
The system notes that Helios' presence in the setting is logically impossible and asks how he could be there.
Recalling the brown-haired boy mentioning a new ability, the girl wonders if that is the cause of this anomaly. Helios realizes where they are.
The girl confirms his assessment.
Helios notes that her tone sounds exactly like his master while looking at the teal-haired girl. Helios recalls waking up in a massive hollow chamber. He remembers seeing prisoners fighting and witnessing a woman attacking a young girl, which prompted him to intervene. Helios reflects on how naturally the girl knows his name and tone.
He sees the familiar silhouette of the brown-haired boy behind the teal-haired girl.
Covering his face, Helios realizes he has become too used to his master's male disguise.
Helios kneels and asks if it is really his master, while she asks who else would know his name.
A soft, quick shh sounding as the girl silences his loud questioning.
She physically covers his mouth. The silver-haired woman watches them closely.
The silver-haired woman asks to be filled in on the conversation.
The teal-haired girl tells the woman it is not the time for her to be acting this way. An announcement interrupts the woman's amusement.
The trial results are declared void. They look at the announcement together.
The announcer scolds the master of the 100th floor for playing around while the woman laughs and apologizes, but the trial is ordered to resume in an hour.
Helios is baffled by the mention of the 70th floor and the master of the 100th floor.
Helios reaches out for her hand. The teal-haired girl tells Helios to follow her quietly.
She leads him by the hand as they walk through the arena grounds.
A soft, quick tap sounding as Helios looks back with a cautious glance. A soft, quick smile sounding as the silver-haired woman laughs cheerfully.
The scar-faced woman demands to know his identity with a stern glare.
A soft, heavy thud sounding as they walk while the narrator identifies the king of prisoners.
Helios explains that the master of the 100th floor has total freedom throughout the tower.
The teal-haired girl laughs in her chibi form while her companion watches with a dark gaze.
Helios sighs and asks for a clear explanation of their current location and situation.
She clarifies that she is currently enduring a specific form of punishment.
He asks about the nature of the penalty while the tower looms in the background.
She reveals she must experience a prisoner's wretched memories firsthand in a living hell.
He realizes her uniform and adjusted age were intentional parts of the trial context.
A soft, quick tap sounding as he wonders if his presence is due to his own ability.
She acknowledges his quick intuition, but admits the situation has become a major headache.
She reflects on the complication of Helios seeing her true face and her hesitation to alter his mind.
A soft, dark sizzle sounding as she jokingly suggests a blow to the head might erase his memory. A soft, quick tsk sounding as she asks if his reaction is soft because she looks like a child. A soft, heavy thud sounding as she turns and asks for his honest impression of her looks.
He admits she looks like a young girl, noting that he hasn't seen a mirror since arriving.
Helios struggles to find words.
The girl stands amidst purple flowers. In their chibi forms, Helios denies any romantic feelings after the girl asks if she is his type. Helios despairs over her stray hair. Helios adds that her hair and eyes are both supposed to be pitch black. The teal-haired girl notes that her features are clearly teal to anyone watching. Helios wonders if this is his power. A soft, quick tsk sounding as Helios's chibi self assumes his weak power is distorting her true appearance. A woman's heel against flowers. The teal-haired girl claps her hands and suggests they stop talking and start training. Helios asks where they would train. She reminds him they have an hour before they must return.
The tower looms over the forest.
Narration questions the strictness of the tower's management, noting that it is full of loopholes.
It observes that an intermediate ranker shouldn't be able to reach the 70th floor directly.
The narrator notes that loopholes exist because only lunatics attempt the upper levels.
She considers if they are simply trapped inside her nightmare.
She wonders if this is special protagonist treatment before moving on.
A soft, heavy thud sounding as she tells him it is time to proceed.
They arrive at the arena's interior as he reflects on following his master into a nightmare. A soft, heavy thud sounding as Chibi Helios despairs over the unexpected, hellish training simulator.
A soft, quick tap sounding as he continues his quiet reflection.
Narration notes that other prisoners are sneaking curious glances at the pair.
A soft, heavy thud sounding as Helios realizes they are actually straight up terrified.
A soft, heavy thud sounding as he asks her what name he should use for her.
He hopes to finally learn her real name.
A soft, clear clink sounding as she asks if her current form lacks authority.
A soft, heavy thud sounding as she suggests borrowing her disciple's name instead.
A soft, clear clink sounding as she asks how the name Bell sounds to him.
A soft, quick tap sounding as he processes her suggestion in silence. An announcement declares the trial is resuming, and Helios asks for the rules of the 70th floor.
A loud, sudden boom sounding as thorns and smoke erupt throughout the arena.
A soft, light rustle sounding as they find themselves in a lush jungle, and he asks where they are. A soft, light splash sounding as they spot a small island surrounded by the sea.
The announcer laughs and introduces the survival game theme for the higher floors. She confirms that the only goal is literal survival.
The king's special request mandates that exactly 2 final survivors will remain this time.
A loud, sudden boom sounding as a scream of pain echoes through the forest. A sharp, sudden spark sounding as she notes the trial has officially begun. Stabbing a carnivorous plant's attacking ton.
The teal-haired girl warns that the environment itself is a threat, while the silver-haired boy watches the plant dissolve. They traverse a desolate beach, choosing to avoid the dangerous vegetation for now.
Helios notes the unique terrain while the girl explains that higher floors possess increasingly intricate ecosystems. High-floor environments grow increasingly complex. Helios recalls waking up inside the tower structure, noting the vast difference in their current surroundings. Walking along the shore, Helios asks about the tower boss while the girl compares him to an invasive species. Helios expresses his distaste for the collapsing trials and the vanishing restrictions within the tower. The teal-haired girl suggests they stop talking and begin searching for the other participants. Helios looks toward the horizon and asks if they will be forced to kill those they find. The girl stares back and wonders how he would react if she confirmed his fears. Helios faces a heavy moral dilemma. Narration reveals Helios has never killed a prisoner, though the tower may not tolerate such idealism forever. The teal-haired girl asks if he could take a life if it were the only way to survive. A heavy question of survival looms. Looking away, the teal-haired girl states firmly that she has no desire to kill anyone. Helios admits he also has no wish to die, even if he avoids violence.
He recalls a memory of his master teaching him that he can create his own answers when he dislikes the given ones.
Helios declares his absolute refusal to either kill others or be killed himself. The girl laughs warmly among the flowers, calling his impossible resolve incredibly greedy. Helios freezes as her laugh triggers a familiar, piercing sense of déjà vu. She asks if she sounds like a hypocrite, but Helios quietly reassures her that she does not. The teal-haired girl questions if he truly thinks no one else in history has shared his stubborn mindset.
Recalling a specific prisoner from memory.
Narration describes a legendary woman who became a king without compromising her beliefs or her demand to be called mama. Helios encourages the girl to live however she chooses, as no one else can live her life for her. A soft, quick sparkle sounding as the girl offers to provide an answer with her own hands. A sharp, sudden zap sounding as the girl unleashes blue lightning on prisoners hiding in the bushes. She advises him that actual killing is not required for success in the trial. A soft, heavy splash sounding as they observe a dark, bloody trail on the ground. Red text clarifies that incapacitating an opponent counts as a successful elimination. Helios grips his staff tightly, bracing for the inevitable combat. Helios reflects on the girl's overwhelming power, realizing her childlike appearance was purely a deceptive penalty.
Helios is forced to fend off passing prisoners while his master cheers him on from behind.
She ruthlessly blocks the path of fleeing opponents, leaving Helios with no choice but to fight.
A sharp, clear clink sounding as Helios defends himself against a relentless onslaught.
The teal-haired girl offers empty reassurance while Helios fears he might actually die. A soft, heavy thud sounding as his legs give out under the immense physical strain. Collapsed on the grass, Helios realizes only one factor kept him alive through the ordeal. A soft, quick tap sounding as a foot halts before his weary face. His master had been secretly intercepting every truly fatal blow directed at him. She looks down at him with a playful, mocking smile. Helios glares up, his purple eyes filled with unspoken frustration toward her methods. He questions why she even possesses healing powers as he struggles to catch his breath. She uses her energy to repeatedly pull him back from the brink of death during training. A loud, sudden boom sounding as she lures the island's monsters toward him. Overwhelmed, Helios decides the lower floors were a mercy compared to this nightmare. He begs for a quick end, but she responds with feigned offense at his disheartening words. Helios stares at her, convinced he is being trained by a literal demon. They debate the name she bestowed upon him, which he never agreed to.
A sharp, sudden zap sounding as Helios somehow manages to endure another strike.
She reflects on his rare, frustratingly impressive natural talent for survival.
A soft, light rustle sounding as she investigates a mark on the ground.
She smiles down at his prone form, satisfied that he survived the latest trial.
Helios remains silent, his stoic gaze betraying nothing to his master.
She encourages him to finally voice the questions weighing on his mind. She admits to having some prior knowledge of the tower's boss.
A heavy silence falls between them as they exchange knowing looks.
Helios prepares to transition to a different line of inquiry about their situation.
A soft, light rustle sounding as she asks how he awakened his powers.
She notes that such awakenings usually require a specific traumatic catalyst or reason. Helios looks away, recalling the moment his abilities first manifested.
He closes his eyes, losing himself in the memory of his past.
That moment marked the first time he saw the true nature of his master. He recalls her sitting in contemplative silence during his early days of training.
A loud, sudden boom sounding as a sudden noise pulls him back to the present conflict.
A soft, quick sparkle sounding as he senses an approaching presence in the woods.
A mysterious voice praises his impressive reaction speed from the shadows. Helios is baffled to see a white fox greeting him cheerfully amidst the chaos.
A small white fox appears, and the girl explains that it is a familiar presence Helios should recognize, identifying the fox as a boss's summon. Marla, the silver-haired woman, appears with a cheerful greeting, calling the girl kiddo again.
Marla mocks Helios' confusion while the girl explains the summon is just a trick, not the boss's main body.
The silver-haired woman identifies as Marla.
Helios is stunned by her identity.
Marla laughs loudly, delighted that the young man fell for her little surprise.
Marla teases the girl for bringing such a cute companion into the prison trials.
Helios stares at Marla, struggling with the intense feeling that he has met her before.
Marla wonders how the girl could possibly know her summon if she is seeing it for the first time.
The teal-haired girl realizes that by defeating Mama, the trial can finally be brought to an end.
She turns to Helios and announces that this confrontation will be his final training session. The girl points directly at Marla, identifying her as the boss they must overcome.
Marla smiles with a dangerous glint in her eyes, noting that she has been severely underestimated. A massive summon beast lunges forward.
Helios braces himself as the giant beast lunges, acknowledging the girl's warning with a shout.
A loud, sudden boom sounding as their opposing energies collide in a massive shockwave.
Marla casually deflects the incoming energy blast with a smirk and a playful apology. Marla expresses deep curiosity about them, charging a massive blue energy blast.
The narrative lingers on a lingering question regarding true identity.
Marla steps forward, questioning who is actually protecting whom in this trial.
A sharp, sudden zap sounding as she gathers a sphere of destructive energy.
The teal-haired girl gasps in alarm at the sudden escalation of the threat.
A loud, sudden boom sounding as Marla launches her attack toward Helios.
Helios recovers, looking toward the aftermath of the explosion with grit.
A loud, sudden boom sounding as she conjures a massive blue shield to block the next strike.
A soft, quick sparkle sounding as the strain of the barrier takes its toll on her.
Helios realizes the massive energy requirement is quickly draining her strength. A loud, sudden boom sounding as they prepare for a final, desperate counterattack before the shield breaks. Helios falls into a pensive, heavy silence.
Helios asks what is happening, noting that the girl is suddenly attacking without a shred of mercy.
Turning away, Helios asks if she truly knows the identity of the person she is currently possessing.
The teal-haired girl stares back, clarifying that her previous statement was nothing more than a guess.
Helios lowers his head, shrouded in deep thought as he processes her words.
A sharp, heavy thud sounding as Helios grips his staff, noting the eerie similarities between her and that other woman. Helios observes that even their smiles and fighting methods appear to be perfect matches for one another.
A soft, quick tap sounding as the teal-haired girl dismisses the chatter, insisting he listen carefully to her instructions.
A loud, sudden boom sounding as she explains that this vivid 70th floor actually exists within the real prison. Standing among the flowers, the girl listens as Helios asks if her earlier mention of memories referred to her own. Helios wonders if the memories she mentioned actually belonged to her, the master.
A sharp, sudden zap sounding as Marla warns them to brace for the imminent arrival of a new threat.
A soft, quick sparkle sounding as Helios and the girl prepare to defend against the approaching beast. Marla smiles broadly, inquiring if they are truly prepared for the next phase of the trial.
A loud, sudden boom sounding as a massive, dark shadow looms over the forest canopy. Helios narrows his eyes, sensing the immense weight and pressure of the situation. A soft, quick sparkle sounding as a pillar of smoke rises from the distant island shore.
Helios recognizes the energy signature, comparing it to the monsters he previously encountered in the basement. Marla explains how a prisoner's energy can go berserk, leading to the formation of a rift from corrupted power. Helios is confused by the concept of a rift and asks for further clarification on what she means. A soft, light rustle sounding as the dense forest remains still for a fleeting moment.
A soft, heavy thud sounding as Helios collapses, prompting Marla to step in because he seems to be struggling.
The teal-haired girl looks down at his prone form in contemplative silence. Marla notes that Helios likely has no idea that this specific location exists in the outside world. Marla teases the girl for finding such an unlucky genius who is still only an intermediate ranker.
A sharp, sudden zap sounding as she reveals that prisoners are treated as expendable slaves to block rifts.
The narrative notes that this dark reality is the truth Helios and his party will eventually discover. A grim realization settles that the tower is truly a revolting place.
A sharp, sudden zap sounding as the sky begins to shatter, signaling that the space is finally collapsing.
The teal-haired girl holds the silver-haired boy close as the world fragments around them.
The teal-haired girl confirms the grim truth of their situation with a quiet, steady voice. A glimmer of light shines as she focuses on her final remaining hope.
She looks down at Helios, declaring that he is a unique and deeply precious person to her.
Marla laughs at the idea of others being heartbroken, but the teal-haired girl tells her to forget them. Looking him in the eyes, she makes the startling revelation that she is actually his future self. Marla chuckles dismissively, finding the claim of coming from the future to be a bit of a cliché.
A loud, sudden boom sounding as the sky cracks further, prompting Marla to ask if they get along in the future.
The narrative explains that throwing a prisoner near a rift causes their internal energy to go completely berserk.
A soft, quick sparkle sounding as a massive explosion erases the rift upon contact with the berserk energy.
She reflects on how the Empire conveniently uses the lives of prisoners to solve natural disasters.
Marla acknowledges the grim efficiency of the Empire's methods with a somber expression.
Marla smiles, her golden eyes reflecting an unspoken understanding of the girl's words. A soft, quick tap sounding as Marla reaches out, stating that her future self must eventually come to love him.
Helios looks away, admitting that he still cannot grasp the meaning behind her words or her feelings.
A sharp, sudden zap sounding as Helios reflects on failing to understand the emotions she tried to teach him. He confesses his ongoing inability to comprehend complex human feelings like love.
A soft, quick sparkle sounding as a blinding white light begins to consume the entire scene.
Narration suggests that her sacrifice to save a mere prisoner was nothing more than a pointless waste of life. Marla expresses her simple hope that Helios will manage to retain his humanity through the coming trials.
A soft, light rustle sounding as Marla begins to fade, wondering if they will ever cross paths again.
The teal-haired girl smiles knowingly, expressing her doubt about a certain outcome.
The teal-haired girl playfully refuses a request with a cheerful closed-eye smile.
A soft, quick tap sounding as Marla suddenly appears behind the girl with a grin.
Marla looms over them as a massive, intricate magic seal glows brightly in the air.
The teal-haired girl is left stunned and pale by the display of overwhelming power.
She shuts her eyes tight, bracing for whatever comes next.
Helios wakes up in a prison cell as a soft, quick sparkle sounding echoes near the distant castle. Helios sits upright, questioning if the trial known as Bjol has finally concluded.
The brown-haired master looks over Helios, wondering if his presence is the cause of recent events.
Helios questions if he is seeing his master's memories, while the brown-haired master finds his sharp intuition troublesome. Helios lies back down, his expression weary as he processes the confusing information. Helios stares blankly, stunned to learn that he has been unconscious for more than a day.
Helios recalls his master collapsing and wonders why he is currently sitting on a prison bench.
The brown-haired master watches Helios closely with a neutral, contemplative expression. The brown-haired master concludes that Helios's confusion seems genuine, and he isn't lying.
Stretching his arms, the brown-haired master feigns great concern over Helios's apparent memory loss.
The brown-haired master calls for mealtime, but Helios declines, claiming his stomach feels uneasy.
Helios remains seated alone as a loud, sudden boom sounding signals a heavy door closing.
Helios covers his face with his hands, noting that he hasn't been acting like himself lately. Flickering memories of white feathers and a soft blue light prompt Helios to question their origin.
Helios stares downward, his face partially hidden by his hair as he struggles with his thoughts.
A vision of the teal-haired girl appears, looking down at Helios with a gentle, silent gaze.
Helios groans into his hands, admitting that he truly cannot remember anything at all.
The brown-haired master gazes into the distance with a serious and pensive look.
A red-haired man waves enthusiastically, shouting for his captain and brother to join the group.
The brown-haired master walks away, confident that the man named Hades will not suspect his plans.
Helios examines a worn document, recalling the lieutenant's warning to prepare for Hades' arrival.
The teal-haired girl manifests her energy, annoyed that the master hasn't revealed the helper's identity.
Helios stands with his head bowed, expressing regret that he hadn't eliminated Hades much earlier.
The brown-haired master leans in close, asking Helios exactly who it is he wants to kill.
Helios dismissively replies, "Someone," prompting his master to ask for a specific name. Helios blushes while surrounded by flowers, insisting that the master should be worrying about him instead. The brown-haired master looks at him with a puzzled expression, asking if he is feeling sick.
The master reaches out and gently pats Helios on the head to comfort him.
A wavy-haired girl questions their fitness for the tower while a man groans in exhaustion.
A soft, quick tap sounding as the party stands before a massive, ornate stone door.
The brown-haired master smiles at his team, challenging them to remember their group motto.
A soft, light rustle sounding as the heavy double doors slowly creak open.
Helios looks up in awe, realizing they have entered some kind of sacred shrine.
Looking over the balcony, the master questions the identities of the people gathered in the arena.
The brown-haired master explains that the trials from the 41st floor onward are team battles.
Narrative text introduces the concept of floor masters who decide the fate of every trial.
The red-haired man expresses shock at the presence of such formidable-looking rookies.
A man with a missing tooth and a dark cloak laughs heartily at the newcomers.
A soft, quick sparkle sounding as the cloaked man orders the newbies to be braved forward.
The red-haired man clenches his glowing fist, shouting a warning for everyone to be careful. He realizes with horror that his body has suddenly stopped moving according to his will. He glares at the laughing man in the cloak, wondering if he is the source of the paralysis.
A sudden, sharp zap sounding as a teammate collapses, prompting a frantic warning to remain vigilant during the difficult trial.
Helios watches the brown-haired master with wide-eyed shock, noting that his older brother's knees seemed suspiciously light.
Helios and the red-haired man share a tense, silent look of growing concern.
The group kneels before a cloaked figure as the brown-haired master suspects his brother has a hidden plan.
The cloaked man laughs arrogantly, preparing to reintroduce himself to the newcomers.
He grandly announces his family as the owners of the 41st floor, though the master finds the name incredibly lame.
The team whispers about whether they must fight everyone or simply target the captain.
The cloaked man continues his dramatic posing, blissfully unaware of the group's skepticism.
A sudden outburst of confusion erupts as the atmosphere shifts.
The cloaked man insolently grabs the master's hair, prompting a desperate cry of alarm from the silvered-haired boy.
Despite the humiliation, the master remains calm as a steady presence.
The captor mocks the master for being weak as he forces him down. A soft, quick sparkle sounding as the man gloats about his own perceived greatness. In a blur of motion, the master suddenly flips his captor over, catching him completely off guard.
A soft, heavy thud sounding as the man hits the floor with a painful gasp.
The master stands casually, explaining the process of clearing this specific section. He notes that the first step involves passing the floor master's trowel. Raising a finger, the brown-haired master prepares to explain the second part of the situation.
A cloaked man recoils in pure terror, shouting about the arrival of a ridiculous monstrosity. A loud, sudden boom sounding as a massive bolt of lightning strikes the ancient stone arena. The cloaked man screams in agony as he is defeated while serving as the floor master.
Text explains that the victor can choose to become the new floor master or advance.
The brown-haired master smiles confidently, bathed in a radiant golden light. Another cloaked man on the ground groans in defeat. The enemy's subordinate shouts for his captain, baffled by the sudden turnaround.
The master concludes his demonstration, leaving his teammates wondering if they are expected to do the same.
Back at the trial, the master reflects on how the enemies were brutally reduced to their current state.
Helios looks on with a grim, determined expression.
Helios readies a massive axe, signaling the rest of the team to prepare for combat. The injured enemy leader desperately orders his subordinates to capture the group immediately.
A fierce battle breaks out as Brett bleeds from a wound while Hala and the others unleash their powers.
Helios spots the man who previously grabbed the master's hair, causing the man to panic for an exit.
The man seizes Hyla, threatening to kill her if anyone takes another step. The red-haired man and Brett simply laugh, mocking the man for choosing such a dangerous hostage.
A commanding voice orders the man to raise his hands. The man screams in terror as his body begins to move against his will, forcing his arms up.
Hyla stands unaffected and asks the master if she should hand the captor over to Helios.
A panicked man screams for mercy as Helios readies his massive axe to finish the battle.
A soft, quick sparkle sounding as the brown-haired master touches Helios' shoulder, telling him that's enough.
Helios asks if he can hit the man once more, but his master refuses and tells him to stop being so polite.
A system notification confirms that the 41st floor trial has ended following the opponent's incapacitation.
Narrative text notes that news of Helios' party passing the 41st floor spread rapidly far and wide.
Helios sits on a wooden crate and admits that the situation is starting to get annoying.
Brett and Hala share a brief moment of levity during a break in their trials. Text explains that the 42nd floor trial was a game of Russian roulette where players shot themselves.
Helios' group won easily after Hyla showed hallucinations to their opponents during the gamble. The red-haired man enthusiastically praises his sister's amazing skill while she tells him to stop talking.
Hala asks Helios to pick up where he left off, but the silver-haired boy is momentarily confused.
Helios examines his hand and remarks that the climb has been unexpectedly tough.
Helios recalls they were discussing the floors between 41 and 50, which his master confirms. The master explains that the tower designates a master for each floor to manage other prisoners. Hyla questions if being a floor master is amazing, prompting the master to explain their combat obligations. He explains that floor masters can accept bribes for simple games or inflict pure torture on enemies. The brown-haired master smiles while warning that losing control of a floor means the end. He notes that it is impossible to become a floor master without the support of a major family. A diagram of the tower illustrates how families use floor masters to expand their influence. The teal-haired girl listens as the master explains that losing a floor results in immediate expulsion and targeting. Narrative text emphasizes the cruel fate awaiting anyone who loses the protection of a major family.
The red-haired man calls the situation brutal as Helios notes they only have one objective left. Helios stares forward with a determined expression, stating they must continue defeating the floor masters. The master rallies the group to get rolling, eventually eliciting a loud, unified shout of agreement.
The scene shifts to a dimly lit stone hallway.
A firm voice from behind the door commands the visitor to enter.
A guard enters the room, announcing that he has brought Brett, the requested prisoner, to Lord Hades.
Lord Hades, a black-haired man in a vest, orders the guard to leave them alone. The prisoner Brett stands stiffly, his feet shifting as a sign of his growing anxiety. Hades looks over a document, beginning to address the prisoner by name.
Brett confirms his identity as he stands sweating under the nobleman's gaze.
Hades notes that this is their second meeting and expresses regret for his previous indifference. Hades reflects privately on Brett's hidden potential and impressive resilience. He considers it a waste to keep Brett as a lowly grout. Hades reassures him that their prior agreement remains in effect.
Brett confirms that his wish to save his family has not changed.
Hades reveals that there is someone close to Brett who shares a nearly identical situation.
He mentions a guard who also lost his family to a killer, leaving Brett stunned. A sharp, sudden zap sounding as Hades clenches his fist, showing a cold disregard for the details.
He decides to keep the rest of the conversation brief.
Leaning in, Hades delivers a chilling command for Brett to betray the others.
He urges Brett to break them apart and kill them as bloody chains manifest.
A dark, malevolent energy radiates from Hades as he smiles amidst the spectral chains. A soft, light rustle sounding as Helios looks at his master with a look of quiet confusion. The master tells Helios to go get treated rather than showing off his battle injuries.
The teal-haired girl explains that their quick success has caused everyone to start picking fights with them.
The brown-haired master stands beside Helios as they prepare to move on to the next challenge.
Helios stares downward and reflects on a startling realization that has naturally come to him.
Looking away, Helios concludes that his master has become completely obsessed with him.
Helios notes that his master's behavior is not born from any sense of simple affection or attachment.
A soft, quick tap sounding as Helios questions if feeling euphoria from this obsession is abnormal.
Surrounded by purple roses, Helios insists he doesn't care about the reason, as long as his master only looks at him.
Helios repeats to his master that he is fine and does not require any medical treatment.
The teal-haired girl wonders if his discomfort is a side effect of a previous mental attack.
The teal-haired girl watches the interaction with a serious and observant expression.
A soft, quick sparkle sounding as Helios questions exactly what it is he is supposed to sense.
Brett stands amidst dark flowers while the master notes that the black-haired man is acting strange. The master watches Brett walk away and asks what is currently wrong with him.
Brett laughs off the concern, claiming that he might just be a bit tired from the trials.
Hyla confronts Brett about his obvious behavior and tells him to just speak his mind.
Brett smiles at Hyla, noting that he is willing to listen because he owes her his life.
Chibi versions of Brett and Hyla argue as Brett continues to feign ignorance about his behavior.
The party stands together in the courtyard as Hyla remains visibly annoyed by Brett's secrecy.
Narrative text reflects on Brett's weird behavior as the atmosphere shifts toward a darker tone.
Bloody chains manifest as the narrative questions the worst possible outcome of Brett's potential betrayal.
A final system message welcomes the group to the 43rd floor as they prepare for the next trial.
3 prisoners in blue uniforms observe the arena, wondering about the upcoming challenge's bizarre concept.
The floor master explains that the game required to pass the floor is remarkably simple.
A massive pit filled with numerous suspension bridges is revealed as the stage for the bridge crossing trial. Someone questions the stability of the incredibly flimsy-looking wooden bridge.
Observers note the disconnected planks and strategize that they must move them forward from the back to proceed.
Helios listens intently as the floor master begins to outline the specific rules of the game.
A diagram explains that teams must cross the bridge and have all their members reach the finish line first to win.
The rules further clarify that simply arriving at the goal before the floor master's team guarantees a victory.
A bald prisoner asks for clarification on whether surviving members can still pass if some teammates perish.
The floor master confirms that only survivors need to cross, while Brett and Hyla plan to use the planks to their advantage.
Helios stands in deep contemplation, silently processing the trial's mechanics. Helios turns his gaze toward Brett, addressing him directly.
Helios requests that Brett takes the lead, a suggestion that causes Brett to laugh with nervous surprise.
The floor master commands all participants to take their starting positions in the vast arena.
The team readies themselves as a booming voice signals the official start of the trial. Chaos erupts as participants race across the bridge, shouting warnings to avoid falling or pushing.
Brett crouches and declares his readiness as dark, shifting energy begins to radiate from his fingertips.
Brett successfully manifests a path of shadow platforms across the pit, expressing relief at his success.
Helios steps onto the shadow path, telling Brett it is enough as the latter explains the need for intervals.
Helios instructs Hyla and the teal-haired girl to move forward while they maintain a defensive posture.
Helios stares forward with resolve, noting that there is one more thing to consider.
The brown-haired master waves the group forward, telling them he will follow at his own pace.
The group launches forward with a sudden burst of speed. Competitors struggle to maintain their balance on the shifting ropes of the bridges.
Other prisoners are baffled by the appearance of the black platforms, wondering if they were created from energy. The bald prisoner orders his team to sabotage the group by focusing all attacks on their black platforms.
Helios orders his teammates to move onto the ropes as the shadow platforms begin to crumble under the assault.
Helios and his team skillfully run along the narrow ropes, prioritizing defense as they rush toward the finish line. An aerial view captures the team's daring sprint across the ropes, leaving their opponents stunned.
The teal-haired girl reflects on how their daily physical training gives them an edge over those who rely solely on energy.
An opponent curses their inability to reach the team as Brett and Helios urge everyone toward the nearby goal. Helios expresses confidence that his master will succeed as long as the rest of the team manages to pass. Brett reaches the final post and leans against it, panting heavily from the immense physical strain. Helios urges a hesitant Brett to keep moving, reminding him that the entire team must pass for them to succeed. Helios addresses his captain as he continues to process his master's intense focus on him. A sudden, sharp zap sounding as Helios looks up in shock at an unexpected occurrence.
Brett swings his arm with a faint smile while offering a casual apology for his current actions. Disaster strikes as a rope snaps, sending the team members plummeting into the dark pit below. A chorus of desperate screams echoes through the arena as the group falls into the abyss. The brown-haired master suddenly leaps into action, gritting his teeth as he makes a move. A loud, sudden quah sounding as he reaches out to seize the rope. A deep, sudden doom sounding as prisoners plummet into the abyss. Gareth decides to betray the master with the red dagger. A sudden realization interrupts the dark moment. Hyla watches Gareth plunge the dagger into Helios's chest. A loud, sudden quah sounding as Helios gasps from the wound. A soft, quick tuck sounding as a foot slips from the ledge. Helios falls toward the darkness, seemingly lifeless. The master's gaze sharpens as he reacts to the fall. He catches Helios midair with a firm grip. Looking at the wound, the master confirms his suspicions about the attack. A sinister man with red eyes laughs at the chaos. The master realizes the bridge was merely a decoy to target Helios.
Hyla stands beside the master, pondering his lingering suspicions.
Holding Helios close, the master prepares to depart.
A loud, sudden quah sounding as Helios groans in pain. Golden light begins to emanate from the master's hand. As they ascend, the master warns Helios about the price of their entanglement. The master asks for Helios's kindness.
Helios looks at the master with exhaustion.
They soar through glowing motes of energy.
The red-haired man shouts for his boss.
He worries about the pit's extreme depth.
A pillar of radiant light bursts forth. A soft, quick step sounding as a steady foot announces their safe return. The master carries Helios to safety as the group egusses. The party gathers around their injured comrade. A system message confirms the end of the 43rd floor trial. A girl heals Helios with green magic. She focuses intensely on the healing process. The master orders Helios to wake up. The girl explains that her healing magic reveals Helios is surprisingly unharmed. The master dismisses the girl's apology, insisting she has done nothing wrong. Gareth is left bound and defeated. Brett is shown hunched over on a stone floor, seemingly strained or injured. The master suddenly strikes Brett, sending him crashing down with a painful gasp. A bloodied Brett coughs as the master tells him to provide an explanation, promising to at least listen.
The master laughs mockingly, revealing that he knows Brett's true identity as his brother, Sir Gareth.
Brett, now identified as Gareth, laughs and admits his betrayal was motivated by amusement in a place of madmen. The master's expression hardens as he demands to know who gave Gareth the mysterious red dagger. Gareth dismisses the idea of being commissioned, claiming he simply couldn't stand the sight of a certain individual. Gareth vents his frustration, resenting someone who acted righteous despite being a prisoner with guard backing. The master grabs Gareth by the hair and silences him, pointing out the flaws in his murderous logic. A massive pillar of golden light erupts as the master notes that death in the tower is not permanent. Holding Gareth's head, the master explains that they are currently within a completely secluded space. He emphasizes that they are isolated and that no one else can hear their conversation. Hyla and the others watch the glowing barrier from afar as the master prepares to continue their talk. Red flowers surround the mysterious dagger. Gareth reveals the dagger belongs to the black-haired chief warden. Kneeling among vines, Gareth reflects on Hades and the imperial family.
The brown-haired master stares with suspicion.